Welcome to Sacred Realms. It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast. For the first time in this, what I think is, I don't know the rollout for this thing, Matt. I don't know exactly how we're doing this. I don't even know necessarily when it's coming out. We're doing Four Swords Adventures. Yay!
This is season unknown number 4. Yeah,
we're gonna throw this in when we need it. It's gonna be our emergency auxiliary season. We're just gonna like break glass in case of emergency season.
It's like the little tiny pistol that Deadpool has in his boot in the movie when he pulls it out and he realizes, at the end of the first movie. You know what I'm talking about? It's the very little tiny one.
I've seen that movie one time.
How have you only seen it one time?
It's been 4 years.
Could you explain it with a Star Trek reference?
Could you? Probably.
I don't know if he can.
It's Worf's Mechleth whenever he loses his Batleth.
There you go. When you just have to cut a Borg's arm off.
Yeah, you just got to pull the Mechleth out.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. That was a dangerous thing to be keeping in a spacesuit, right?
Really, though,
Yeah.
Honestly.
All right.
Like sharp edges and necessarily sealed vacuum objects made of cloth.
Good call, Cody. A good Star Trek reference will always get us there. Hi, everybody. So in case it wasn't already clear, we're doing something really special for this episode and for the next few that we're going to spend covering Four Swords Adventures. We are lucky enough to be joined in person by the Wonder Down Under himself. It's Cody Davies here with us in person. Cody, how you doing?
Yee howdy.
It's finally appropriate to say it when you're in the land of the yee howdy.
His yee howdy is so much better in person. Can I just tell you?
It's accompanied by a hand wave, which is even better. It just completes the picture.
Yeah, right. When it's coming around the planet digitally to us, it's great, but it's so much better this way. It's magical.
Agreed.
And you know what the best thing is, Matt?
Tell me the best thing, Lyndon.
We don't just have Cody here today.
That's true. We don't. Who else do
we
have?
brought someone else who came significantly less far than Cody did, but we still appreciate it almost the same amount. Josh from ZU is also here. How you doing, Josh?
I'm a real Texan, so I don't have a yee howdy.
Yeah,
that's accurate. Yes.
I'm pretty sure you washed up on the coast of Florida
after the tragic shipping accident.
After the tragic accident that separated us at birth.
That killed your parents.
Right. My memory was a little hazy.
Yes.
You got Mosesed all the way to Florida and you went to Australia. This is well-known Sacred Realms.
Yes. It's the lore, and we're not here to argue with it. What we are here to do is to have an excellent time talking with both of y'all in person about a Zelda experience that Matt and I have never partaken in. Had no idea what we were even necessarily getting into before we fired it up today. I had a very rough idea of what this game was. And when I say very rough, I mean like I wasn't even necessarily sure what this game was versus like another very similarly named Zelda experience. And like I had no idea when it came out. I had no idea what the story was. None of those things. A huge gap in my Zelda knowledge. And Matt, you were maybe even more in the dark on this than I was, right?
I actually realized I have actually played maybe like an hour and a half worth of this game when I was in middle school. I had a couple friends who I went to middle school with, one of whom had a GameCube, who we played a little bit of this on one time when we were sleeping over, doing what middle schoolers do. They have sleepover parties. And we played some Four Swords. Yeah.
Okay.
So, you didn't play some Four Swords.
We played Four Swords Adventures.
This is the point of distinction that we need to make is Four Swords is a game that we didn't play because this was a difficult setup. The Four Swords is a more difficult setup.
You need 4 copies of the game.
So you need 4 copies of the game.
Which is the primary reason I can't provide that setup.
Gotcha.
Because I only have 1 copy of that game.
So, but then for Four Swords, you have 4 copies of the game. Then how do you go? Like, do you have to have 4?
You need 4 Game Boy Advances.
Okay.
4 copies of the game. and 3 link cables, I think is how it works. I think maybe it's 4 link cables. You have to like get a crisscross in the middle like to make an X between 4 Game Boy Advances.
Okay.
That sounds really horrible.
Yeah, and so that's why.
So then you're all tethered. You're actually tethered together. You're
Okay.
predating wireless communication at all.
Which one, Four Swords versus Four Swords Adventures, is the one that Josh, I think it was one of y'all had the prediction that it was going to become available, or that it could easily become available on the Nintendo Switch Online.
That's Four Swords, because Four Swords was packed in with A Link to the Past on the Game Boy Advance.
Gotcha.
And so if they re-release A Link to the Past again on NSO on GBA, then Four Swords would come with it with online multiplayer, presumably. So you would get 4-player multiplayer easily,
but
because you don't need 2 screens for that game. You only need the 1 screen.
But if we'd been playing Four Swords, we might have been done already. Like it's practically a tech.
It's like
demo.
a 2-hour game.
Yeah,
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. But what I've been told is that Four Swords is the inferior experience overall.
Yeah, it's fun. It has some of the same funness to it of just multiplayer mayhem. It's just a much more brief game that's sort of more score based, kind of meant to be replayed. It has procedurally generated stages,
Almost like an arcade game.
Yeah, it's like, and I say they're not truly procedurally generated. They're like, I understand how they're built, and so there is a limited number of combinations, but it's in the hundreds.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a multiplayer mode more than it is a game. It's there are games that you've played. Phantom Hourglass had a multiplayer mode that I don't think you engaged with, but
No, not even a bit.
there's a bunch of these games have just brief little modes that are like, oh, there's a phantom chasing you or whatever. I think whatever it was for Phantom Hourglass. But yeah, that it was just a thing thrown in, and they turned it into a full game with Four Swords Adventures, which is a much more comprehensive game. We were wondering how much we'll get through it, and we got through the first 2 worlds out of 8, I think.
Yeah, we had a very like pie in the sky, like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we could get this much done, right? And we got 2/3 of that amount done, but actually still a pretty substantial amount of game, given that there was like a learning curve involved for Matt and I. We'll talk about all of this here in just a minute. I don't want to get ahead of the ye old Sacred Realms rundown too much, but that's what we're here to do. We're going to have a little miniature season covering Four Swords Adventures. Not entirely sure yet how many episodes it's going to cover. The plan right now is that while Cody is in town, we're going to try and beat the whole thing. And it's going to be a season featuring Cody, Matt, Josh, and myself for the entirety of it.
Not this time. It never happened.
You know, if something goes sideways and in the back half we have to whittle it down to just Josh, Matt, and I after Cody goes back to Australia, then maybe we'll do that. But we're trying to get the whole thing done with Cody present. So
I think we can do it.
I think we can do it. I think it's doable.
Not a chance.
So that's the whole deal. And you know what is fun, Matt? I don't think we were even planning on doing this as part of the Sacred Realms situation, like up front when we started the podcast. But I think we're going to insert this into the ranking.
Oh, really?
At the end, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're playing the whole thing. We might as well rank it. You know?
Sure. Why not?
I can't think of a good reason not to.
Nope.
So, all right. So gonna be fun times. Let's go ahead and get the housekeeping out of the way, then dive right into our discussion about what we played today. If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda, one little slice at a time. Sacred Realms drops every Wednesday and is available on all major podcast networks. Every week we play a new section of a Zelda game, and then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun to you, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, and be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout out here on the show. If you want more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod to get access to our Discord channel, listener mail, vote on what game we play next, and much more. Additionally, one of the benefits that Master Sword patrons and above get is that we read their names every week here on the show. I'm going to be recording this after the fact because the date of this recording is Saturday, December the 9th, and it will be releasing far after that. So insert patron list here. Those legendary individuals are Franz, Tyler, Freddie, Brandon, Shrikequill, Joseph, Nintendo, Adam, Sakura, Sky, Art, Jeremy, Dante 2, Tom, Andy, Billy, Connor, Rachel, Shepherd Street, Matthew, Chris, Daniel, Fallout 907, Kelso, Tiffany the Star, Il Maestro himself, Dark Nuck, Brian, George, Mike, Dylan, Lennon, Kolku, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru, The Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Ben, Daniel, Nick D _TV, Maximum Nichols, aka Hyrule Interviews himself, Garrett, and Drew. These are the most legendary of individuals, and I would pull an ancient sword from a plinth and duplicate myself into 4 identical copies with any of them any day of the week. But without further ado, let's talk about what we played. We do that, of course, every week in the Sacred Realms Rundown, which is a 6-part analysis of what we played this week and the feelings that it made us feel. Today, we are covering Four Swords Adventures, Chapter 1. And I think we talked about this right before we started rolling tape here. And I think that we can actually get all 6 parts of the Sacred Realms Rundown in here, right?
I think so.
Okay, I think that's possible. Part 1 of the Sacred Realms Rundown is, as always, the plot recap. Matt, I'm committing you to the plot recap for this game.
You better not do that.
No, not here. I'm not going to make you do an impromptu plot recap.
Okay,
but in the future, like, month, whatever, a few weeks down the road, this one's on you.
If this is coming out on when we're doing my wedding break, I'm not doing it.
If this comes out during Matthew's wedding break, then I'll do it for him.
There you go.
Okay. You know what? I have no idea who's doing the plot recap. We'll figure it out.
Someone's doing the plot recap. Insert plot recap
Insert
here. Cody
plot
might be
recap.
doing the plot recap.
I could.
If you let Cody do it, it will only be the parts with shovels.
Okay.
Oh, well, even better. I think those were the most interesting parts.
I would agree. I would agree with that, Cody. You could do the plot recap. That'd
Except
be
for
great.
when Josh stole all my Force gems.
Legends of long ago tell the story of an evil wind sorcerer named Vati, who came to the peaceful land of Hyrule and, using his dark magic, terrorized the land, kidnapping many beautiful maidens and imprisoning them. A young warrior clad in green appeared, wielding a magical blade which allowed him to split into 4. This boy defeated Vati and sealed him into a shrine deep in the remotest parts of the kingdom. The blade, which the boy held, was called the Four Sword and acted like a lock on Vati's prison. For ages, the evil sorcerer was held in this prison until one day he escaped and took hostage the Princess of Hyrule. Another brave warrior took up the Four Sword and drove Vati back into his prison, rescuing the princess and removing the threat of the Wind Sorcerer forever. Or so he thought. Many, many years later in the Kingdom of Hyrule, it is a dark and stormy night. A sense of foreboding creeps over the land, and Princess Zelda of Hyrule is worried. She feels a malevolent power beginning to grow and summons her friend Link to Hyrule Castle. We arrive, and Zelda explains to us that she fears the seal on the Wind Sorcerer may be weakening. She has summoned the Sacred Maidens of Hyrule to the castle because they alone can conjure the portal which leads to Vati's prison. Zelda intends to go through the portal and check on the integrity of Vati's seal, and she wants us to accompany her as a guard. We follow Zelda into an inner chamber where the 6 maidens are gathered, and in unison with the princess they conjure a magical portal. Before Zelda can walk through it, however, a dark energy intrudes on the proceedings and coalesces into an evil reflection of ourself. This apparition harnesses dark magic to bind each of the maidens and Zelda into sealed crystals, which are then whisked away before our very eyes. The Shadow Link turns and runs through the portal, and we give chase, determined to rescue Zelda and the maidens. We emerge from the portal in an ancient clearing, the Sanctuary of the Four Sword. Shadow Link leads us to a shrine with a magnificent blade protruding from its top, and we know that this must be the ancient prison of Vati. We try to do battle with Shadow Link in order to hopefully free Zelda and the maidens, but without a weapon it's simply no use, and the evil reflection taunts us as we pelt it with useless blows. With no other option, we draw the ancient Four Sword from its plinth, ready to strike Shadow Link down. Immediately, the power of the sword separates us into 4 identical copies, 1 green, 1 red, 1 blue, and 1 purple. In our haste, however, we have traded one villain for another, and as soon as the Four-Sword is removed from its plinth, we hear a whoosh of air and a cyclone whips up around the shrine. The cyclone envelops us, and Shadow Link seizes the opportunity to escape. We can feel the evil wind draining us and sapping the Four-Sword of its power before we are blown clear of the shrine and far away. We get one brief glimpse of the grotesque, one-eyed form of Vati before darkness envelops us. We awake, still split into 4, in a patch of tall grass near Lake Hylia, and are greeted by a friendly voice. An immense owl swoops down onto a nearby perch and introduces himself as Kaepora Gaebora. He tells us that we must begin a hero's quest to rescue Zelda and the maidens and to return Vati to his dark prison. Unfortunately, the Four-Sword has been robbed of its power to seal evil, and only by recovering Force Gems will we be able to infuse it with light energy and return it to its fullest. The owl promises to catch up with us soon and takes flight, leaving us to see if we can track down any Force Gems nearby. Before long, we stumble across a small home occupied by an old adventurer who claims to be a retired Hyrule Castle guard. This wise soul teaches us some basic combat maneuvers which take advantage of our new split situation. Feeling more equipped than we were to tackle the challenges ahead, we embark on an exploration of the area around Lake Hylia, doing combat with a variety of enemies against the backdrop of the streams and waterfalls of the lake region, and collecting the Force Gems that they drop. Along the way, we come across various obstacles that can only be overcome with the help of handy items that have been secreted throughout the world, from hammers to boomerangs and more. We can only hold one item at a time, but luckily each of our 4 copies is able to hold a different item, which makes for a fun game of juggling and trying to make sure that we're properly equipped for any challenge at any time. After collecting a tidy pile of Force Gems, we notice that the Four-Sword has begun to glow with an otherworldly light. It appears that we have gained enough gems to temporarily increase the power of the blade, which should come in handy as we continue our explorations. We can see what looks like the entrance to a cave network in the distance, but are blocked from moving forward by 4 evil eyes that remind us of Vati. Kaepora Gaebora reappears and tells us that these eyes have appeared all over Hyrule and are draining the land of its light. Luckily, the empowered Four-Sword is able to dispatch them, and with the eyes destroyed, we proceed forward into the Cave of No Return. The Cave of No Return turns out to not be quite as dangerous as its name suggests, though it still proves plenty of a challenge for us as fledgling adventurers. In addition to being shrouded in darkness, requiring the use of a lantern to traverse, it is filled with enemies and lethal traps. At the end, we are confronted in battle by Shadow Link, and even though we are not able to completely vanquish the foe, we drive him off for now. Emerging from the cave into the bright sunlight of Hyrule Field, we see the immense walls of Hyrule Castle before us and resolve ourselves to investigate whether any friendly forces remain inside. On our way, we stumble across a peculiar journal, which seems to have written by an individual named Tingle. Tingle writes about a powerful fairy who may be trapped in the castle and requests any adventurers who follow after to be on the lookout. Once we enter the castle, we find that not only is it immensely complicated and difficult to explore, but it is also filled with enemies. Searching for the missing fairy requires us to do battle with evil knights, Armos, and other foes, including a fierce battle with a terrifying ball and chain wielding knight. Eventually, we come to a prison cell, which holds a lone Zora who requests that we reunite them with their friend on the other side of the castle. We manage to find the other Zora, and much to our surprise, the two merge into one and are revealed to be the Great Fairy we've been searching for. The fairy came to investigate the disappearance of the maidens and Zelda, but was overcome by the monsters in the castle. The Great Fairy sends us on our way to root out the evil at the center of Hyrule Castle, but not before using her incredible power to destroy all of the nearby enemies and dispel a magic barrier keeping us from advancing. On the roof of the castle, we are confronted by a massive evil specter wielding a giant sword. This is Phantom Ganon, surely the evil power leading the forces which currently assail the castle. Phantom Ganon lobs lethal balls of energy at us over and over, and we try to use the Four-Sword to reflect them back upon him, but it proves too challenging to find a good angle. It's now that we remember that we have 4 copies of ourselves to rely on, and so we start passing the energy balls from one copy to the next, and then finally back upon Phantom Ganon. The spectral enemy is unable to withstand his own power and falls before us. With Phantom Ganon defeated, a new stairway opens before us, and following it downward to a hidden chamber reveals a blue crystal in which is held one of the 6 maidens, the one in charge of protecting Eastern Hyrule. She applauds us for our courage and bravery and begs us to proceed to East Hyrule in search of the next maiden. With a clearer direction now ahead of us, we journey eastward toward the coastal areas of the kingdom. We know that the Eastern Temple is in that direction, and it seems as good a place as any to search for the next maiden. However, the Hyrule coast lies between here and there, and we set out traversing the seaside terrain, finding new items along the way and battling new enemies. Along the way, we encounter a fairy who is able to empower the items we find to be even more potent, which helps us to win through the hordes of Zora and other foes who would do us harm. In a sandy grotto, we stumble across a vicious Manhandla, which darts around trying to snatch us in its lethal vice-like pincers. Manhandla has 4 heads, which is lucky because we have 4 links, each copy taking turns swiping at the monster until it is defeated, granting us access to a path away from the coast. Between the temple and our current location lies the village of the Blue Maiden, the dwelling place of the maiden who we rescued in Hyrule Castle, and a normally serene little town. Unfortunately, something in the village is very amiss these days, and the residents seem to be in a dark mood. Kaepora Gaebora comes to us again and explains that in addition to its other powers, the Four Sword is able to grant us access to the Dark World, a twisted mirror reality of our own Hyrule. We aren't immediately sure what use this information is to us, but it can't hurt to be aware of. Upon entering the village, we learn what is wrong from some of the villagers who inform us that the children have been disappearing at an alarming rate. We are eager and sympathetic to help solve their plight, and resolve to try and help as much as we can before moving on to the Eastern Temple. A throng of people are congregated outside a building at the north of town, which turns out to be the headquarters of the Seekers Guild, a group devoted to learning the cause of the mysterious disappearances. The head of the guild tells us that he believes a coven of mages to be behind the disappearances, and says that several guildsmen were assigned to track down clues, though they unfortunately have also disappeared. We set off to locate the guildsmen and learn the information they have collected, helped along by gaining access to the Dark World that the owl informed us of, by use of the Moon Pearls, which teleport us in and out of portals leading to this nether realm. In the Dark World, we stumble across a child who tells us that the vanished children are all located in the Dark World somehow, where they can play all day to their heart's content. Also in the Dark World, we discover an apprentice magician by the name of Iris, who accidentally got trapped here without her spellbook and now can't return. She attempted to recite a spell from memory, but succeeded only in teleporting a small house. She asks us to help her locate her spellbook, and we add it to our list of things to do. After much exploration, we find out the clues that the Seekers have managed to acquire, which is simply that the 6 Shrine Maidens must be protected. We of course already knew this, but the head guildsman didn't, and he thanks us for passing on this knowledge by letting us borrow his shovel. While not a very spectacular gift, the shovel does allow us to more freely explore the area, and eventually we discover Iris's spellbook and her magician master, who is most displeased at her shenanigans. We return the spellbook to Iris, who uses it to return the house to its proper place, which grants us access to the easternmost portion of the village. Here we are confronted by the source of the evil in the village, a pair of Shadow Links who we defeat after fierce combat. With these enemies dispatched, light returns along with the missing children. With these families now reunited, we are free to proceed onward to our goal, the Eastern Temple. The Eastern Temple is a vast structure with an imposing facade of stone gargoyles flanking its entrance. Inside, the temple is all gray stone and winding passageways, filled with Stalfos, Wizrobes, and other enemies. Finding our way through this dungeon requires a small arsenal of weapons and items that we find stashed away in its far corners. We persist forward, knowing that all of these foes must be guarding something important, possibly even another Shrine Maiden. Adding to our woes, traversing the entirety of the dungeon is only possible by sending a copy of ourselves into the Dark World using a Moon Pearl to solve certain puzzles. Finally, we are granted a big key which opens 2 chests containing a small fortune of Force Gems, empowering the Force Sword for the fight ahead with what we know must be the most fearsome monster we have yet seen. In a cavernous chamber, we are confronted by the stone menace Argus, a cyclopean creature of living stone surrounded by floating rocks. We are sure the key to defeating Argus is to deal blows to his one eye, but the rocks are impossible to get past without the help of our handy boomerang. Using the boomerang and our own duplicates, we slowly and methodically clear away the defensive shield of stones and are able to deal damaging blows to Argus, who becomes enraged and tries to squash us with its immense form. Fancy footwork allows us to dodge the monster and deal a final killing blow, opening the entrance to a new chamber. Inside this chamber is another maiden trapped in crystal, this one a sunny-looking yellow. This shrine maiden is able to give us more information about Vati, explaining that when he first regained his power, he built a fortress in the heavens called the Palace of Winds, where he is surely now hiding. The Yellow Maiden explains that she presides over the Death Mountain region, where the Tower of Flames lies. In this tower, she is sure another trapped maiden is being held, and so with 2 maidens rescued so far, we leave the Eastern Temple and set our sights on Death Mountain to continue our quest and bring about the final defeat of Vati. All right, y'all, let's get into part 2, which is our takes, where we talk about this section of the game and how it made us feel. Real quick, before we get into our thoughts about this section of the game specifically, let's just give some background on Four Swords Adventures and what this game is and the way that it functions. Josh, I'm going to pass it over to you. Do you mind giving us a quick summary of the experience of Four Swords Adventures?
Sure. So Four Swords Adventures is a GameCube game released in 2004. That is primarily a multiplayer experience. You can play it single player if you want to, and it's a similar but different experience, but it's fun. In multiplayer, you need Game Boy Advances and special link cables to connect 4 Game Boy Advances to your GameCube, or in our case, we're using a Wii, to have a second screen similar to how you would play a Wii U with a gamepad. And so you have to pay attention to the television, and then also pay attention to your Game Boy Advance when you are separated from the team or otherwise in an indoor area. The game is separated into 8 worlds that have 3 stages each, and each stage is more or less a dungeon or outdoor dungeon-like area, just a slice of a Zelda game in a 15-minute experience.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yep. I think that wraps it up pretty succinctly. And we said, but do we have a release year on this again? You said 2004?
2004. It was probably June. It was summerish when it came out.
In terms of the games around it, it's important because this is in the style of the Wind Waker to some extent. Mm-hmm. Like there's a lot of Wind Waker influences on it. That released the year before, or it was 2002 in Japan, but 2003 everywhere else, the Wind Waker.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I'm going to start there, just the general tone and look and feel of Four Swords Adventures. I think in my head, this was going to be something that was basically using the Minish Cap aesthetic. Like I was expecting an experience that was kind of cobbled together from sprites and textures and stuff that were being used in the Minish Cap. And unless I'm completely off base here, Minish Cap came out after this game, right?
Yes, they have to have been in development about the same time.
Sure.
Like the Minish Cap was released in Europe and maybe Australia in late 2004. It actually didn't come out in the US until January 2005.
Yeah.
So like there's only like 6 months-ish difference between release. But Link sprite and animations are the same in the Minish Cap and in Four Swords Adventures.
The Minish Cap is influenced by the Wind Waker's style also.
Right, yeah.
Because you remember, because before the Wind Waker, it was the Ocarina of Time style. So, I mean, it's either there's a Link to the Past. There are elements of a Link to the Past in this. I mean, the original Four Swords was a add-on to a Link to the Past. So there's elements of it. But in terms of visual style and that sort of thing, it is all of, you know, the Four Swords games, the Minish Cap, Spirit Tracks, Phantom Hourglass, the handheld games and, you know, side games use that Wind Waker sort of style. for a long time.
Yeah. Was this a Capcom developed thing or was it?
No, the Minish Cap was Capcom. The Minish Cap and the Oracle games were Capcom. I don't know to what degree they would have had inter-dev, they would have known what each other were doing.
Well, and it's interesting because, like, even looking at all of the game artwork, the sprites are the same as Minish Cap, which I know you guys just said. So, like, it's very interesting to me that Capcom would be developing Minish Cap, and then Nintendo Prime, I guess we could call it, would be developing Four Swords Adventure. But they stylistically share so much. The bad guys the same, Vati. You have a lot of the same kind of look and feel, which is really cool. And the Minish Cap is one of my favorite looking and feeling top-down games. So, like, I think it's really good thing about.
But I do think in a lot of ways, like if you were to put screen grabs of the Minish Cap up right next to Four Swords Adventures, Four Swords Adventures is actually seeming in a lot of ways like it relies a lot more on kind of upscale the Link to the Past sort of look and feel, right?
Yes.
The art style is not 1-to-1 between the two things, which was interesting to me.
It's mostly the Link sprite, and like some of the enemy sprites and stuff are reused or shared rather. But no, it is very based on A Link to the Past, and then just takes advantage of the GameCube having more graphical capability for special effects and even just for the textures on the grass even. Just it's prettier than what you're going to find.
It is a really
elsewhere.
good looking game, and that's something that we said right out of the gate was, man, this game already looks better than A Link Between Worlds. Like it's mostly because we didn't like that art style, but like this game visually is really phenomenal, and it kind of hits that really strong nostalgia chord with a lot of Zelda fans who go back to that style of game as their favorite.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a bit blurry up on the TV. It is a 480p game.
And we were playing it on like what is like a
70-inch
TV.
But
It's
when
also not a widescreen game, so we've stretched the whole thing.
And it's a game that we're
horizontally.
watching stretched on a flat screen TV to play a 480p game. But if you actually, because there's two parts to the game, there's the part where you're on the screen and then you go into a cave or something, you're looking back down at your Game Boy Advance, and that's that version of the game, and that's quite crisp and good.
Yeah, for sure. That was definitely kind of an interesting moment of like when you actually do look down at your handheld and you're getting kind of a bit more of the super polished looking, like the graphics can kind of they're a little prettier just in that format, right? Just because of the smaller size and whatnot. And then it really does feel exactly like the Game Boy Advance or A Link to the Past situation.
And that's the thing is that you're sort of seeing a comparison between what old games look like on the TV and what old games were meant to look like.
Right.
And because that's, even with Phantom Hourglass playing it on 3DS XL and that sort of thing, it sort of looks a bit muddy, and that sort of just like changing the format. And the Nintendo 64 in particular has, I don't know, it's gotten a bad reputation for looking gross and muddy, but I think that's because a lot of people are playing them on modern
newer
TVs now.
that don't process that super well. Yeah. Too many pixels for what Nintendo 64 was able to put out.
But it's so fun because we were talking before we started recording about the history of this game and how it started its life as a prequel to A Link to the Past, right?
Right.
And you can kind of see a lot of that, especially in the world design, right, where you have areas that are direct callbacks to their what's the word I'm looking for here?
Predecessors.
Well, to their analogous spaces in A Link to the Past, right? Like we see Hyrule Castle here, and it's expanded, but like
it's the god's sprite from A Link to the Past.
Yeah, and the castle is like obviously with some additions and whatnot, but it's laid out mostly the same, right? The Eastern Palace was the exact same sort of situation. They feel identifiably, they feel about as similar to the versions of those locations in A Link to the Past as the A Link Between Worlds versions do, right? Obviously Link Between Worlds a little bit more juice to work with, but like, it's the Eastern Palace, it's Hyrule Castle, it was a little similar in that way. So that makes it even more strange to me now after having played it, knowing that from a timeline perspective, like from a story placement perspective, that isn't even the case at all. Like it's not relevant to A Link to the Past narratively in any way, shape, or form. Cody, I'm actually going to bounce it over to you real quick. Will you give our listeners a catch up on where this game does fall on the officially stated Hyrule Historia timeline?
Right. So the original Four Swords is in a completely different area of the timeline to Four Swords Adventures. The original Four Swords is it after or before the Minish? It's after the Minish Cap, right?
After the Minish Cap.
After the Minish Cap, but before Ocarina of Time. So Four Swords is an every timeline, except potentially Breath of the Wild. We're not going to get into that.
We're not getting into that. That is wise.
It's an every timeline game that takes place before Ocarina, whereas Four Swords Adventures is in the child timeline after Twilight Princess, and there is plot stuff that will make that a bit more relevant. For now, we don't really have much plot stuff aside from it's Vardy. Vardy's returned.
Yeah.
But yeah, we will get into a little bit later.
So, Minish Cap is Vadi's canonical first appearance, correct? Or like timeline-wise, Minish Cap is the earliest appearance.
Timeline-wise, yes. Yeah. But first appeared in Four Swords, when did Four Swords release?
2002.
2000.
It was with the GameCube, wasn't it? It was
it was with A Link to the Game Boy Advance release of A Link to the Past.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, there's a version of A Link to the Past on the Game Boy Advance that's slightly different. A few things were sort of retconned in terms of sound effects and all this sort of thing to make it in line with the newer games.
Yeah. No pink hair.
Yeah. Tragic.
That is really tragic.
I don't know if that's true. I think the pink hair is still there.
We'll have to check.
Hold on.
I mean, keep going, Cody.
People seem to say that a lot, but I feel like the pink hair is still there.
But yeah, so where were we? So Four Swords Adventures is so it's sort of a full game. Like Four Swords was a tech demo. Technically it's set pre-Ocarina of Time. Four Swords Adventures is it's fully in the timeline, in the child timeline. So it's which is a very interesting I don't know, because a lot of people haven't played it. So most Zelda fans probably haven't played it or haven't finished it, at least.
Link still has pink hair in the Game Boy Advance release of A Link to the Past.
That's good.
Yeah, but he does use the Minish Cap / Wind Waker heavy attack noise, like the hey.
Yeah, he's got Ocarina of Time sound effects.
It's not the definitive version. Like it's been updated, but people won't tell you. Oh, you have to play the Game Boy Advance version. But
that is the version that has the Ice Palace fixed, so you don't have to do the terrible puzzle.
Yeah.
This is actually these little sprites were Blonde Link in Four Swords, so that game actually has two different Link sprites, and I don't know if this has been used again. I think it might be unique.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very strange. But regardless, this game, Four Swords Adventures, is separated story-wise by a great gulf of time in the Zelda universe. If you adhere closely to what the timeline tells you, which that's its own whole discussion. But it is really fun. I enjoy Vati as a villain. I thought it was a little strange that we didn't see his humanized form here. I was kind of expecting
just his giant eyeball.
His human form was created in the Minish Cap.
I was about to say, wasn't Vati always a giant eyeball in every other game besides Minish?
In the original Four Swords, he was this actually just like the armored version of his eyeball form. I don't know if the unarmored version shows up at all.
So Minish Cap, I think it's technically like his origin story. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you're getting into the, here's what happened with the Minish and all of this stuff.
So it's the Ganondorf, Dark Beast Ganon situation, right? It's like origin story. Yeah. He's a person, and then you do something like you kick his ass, and now he's a crazy monster.
He becomes a monster. And in this case, he's sealed away as a monster, and then always just comes back as a monster.
Okay,
you never see his humanoid version again.
Interesting.
There's a lot of sealing away of bad guys in Zelda.
Yeah.
We never permanently eliminate them.
Apparently, that's not something that can be done.
I mean,
right?
So.
Are they billionaires? Is that why we're doing this?
So, look, I have stuff to say about that in Four Swords Adventures, but it's a spoiler, actually, about sealing away. So we'll get to that in a future episode.
Sure. Okay, that sounds good. Matt, I mean, how are you... give me your first impressions of your time with Four Swords Adventures, because like I said, we had no idea what we were walking into here, really.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a lot of fun. Like it's a totally different experience for a Zelda game. It doesn't feel like a Zelda game for the most part, but it's a lot of fun. Like we were laughing and joking, and as much as Cody was throwing people off of ledges, and I was accidentally blowing people up with bombs because I keep forgetting that it's tied to A instead of
you two are a menace.
Yeah, look, mine was purely accidental. Cody was totally on purpose.
Yeah. And this is an aspect of it we haven't covered. At the end of each level, we get scored and we vote for each other, and we say who was the biggest menace, and they lose points.
Who was the biggest helper,
and who was the biggest helper, and they gain points. And you sort of have a winner at the end on this combination of factors. So it is built into the game as a sort of competition.
Yeah, which is awesome. I think that's my favorite part of it, honestly. I mean, shocker, right? I love competition.
Well, it's kind of like what if Mario Party but Zelda,
I mean, that is kind of what it feels like. It's a lot of fun. Like we were just having such a good time, and like they're short, compact little zones that fit within an overarching world that then go into the bigger game as a whole. And like that's a pretty cool little breakdown. So it's very bite-sized. You can kind of chunk this apart, and I thought it was a lot of fun, but very, very different.
Yeah. Josh, I know you're one of those people who keeps a very firm ranking of Zelda titles, and does Four Swords even live on that ranking at all, or does its different format kind of kick it out of consideration? Like you don't really even think of it the same way as.
No, it's on my ranking. All the Four Sword games, both of them, and Triforce Heroes. I keep them on my ranking. They don't get very high on the ranking because, despite being as much fun, they are just totally different experiences and are a bit of a hassle to play the proper way, and are just not gonna hold up to Ocarina of Time or Breath of the Wild or even Twilight Princess.
Sure.
So they live in the bottom 25% there of the list. But yes.
But in terms of how much fun they are, I mean, I mean, I think there's some games on your list that you're having more fun with this than you were having with.
I think that's probably right. Yeah,
no doubt.
Phantom Hourglass, looking at you. It's a really good point, and it's going to be so interesting. Kind of trying to develop an opinion of this game as a Zelda game going forward for me, because the thing is that I think I was expecting it to have Zelda trappings, but not really feel all that much like Zelda. And it really does end up being a little bit more, kind of having a foot in both camps than I was expecting. Like there is a lot of Zelda feel here. And also a lot of things that are done very differently. And I actually to me, that's intriguing. Like that creates a really interesting and fun experience. Matt, were you as surprised as I was by just how much Zelda feel there is to kind of find in here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I think the way that the world is designed to feel like you're exploring an overworld when you're really not. Because if you break it all down, everything that you're doing is a dungeon-esque activity. But they make it feel...
Skyward Sword Part 2.
Exactly. Yeah. But they make it feel overworldy because of the setting that it's in, where you're outside, you're then going into a cave, and you're coming out of the cave, and you're cutting down some grass, and you're interacting with a couple villagers. But it's all flows... I mean, at its base, it's a dungeon, but the way that they frame it,
it's linear,
it makes it feel overworldy, which is really genius game design by them. Like, it's really fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the part that's the most surprising to me, I guess, about it is that it's not just a combat gauntlet, because that's what it could be as a multiplayer game. But we had an entire section in there where there was a kidnapping mystery of children gone missing, and we had to go from house to house solving.
And the only combat you had in the entire thing was at the very end with the boss.
Right, and there was I think maybe 2 encounters, and so only one. I think Josh was the only one to get any points.
Yeah, he killed both of the enemies
for killing enemies.
And we were all like, well,
in the final roundup.
That tracks.
And so that's, I guess, what people might not realize about it too. It's not just 4 people running around with swords slashing Octoroks. It's, they've got characters, they've got plot, so it is in that sense a Zelda game too.
Right, and it is intended primarily as a cooperative game. I mean, you have a bunch of silly nonsense where you blow each other up, and you do get scored, and so sometimes if you're really worried about the score, blowing each other up is to your benefit. But it is primarily meant as a cooperative game, so you get the same type of Zelda items and puzzles, but you just can't solve those puzzles without at least one friend with you.
Yeah. I mean, and notably, you were not allowed to keep those items between stages, right? Which is one of the biggest departures. And you kind of have to juggle them around a little bit too, like which I do think is a lot of fun, because the collaborative element then becomes like, okay, who's holding the boomerang, who's holding the bombs, who's holding the shovel? You come across some Pegasus boots, right? And it's like, okay, well, we're going to need these. Who wants to drop one of the things they have? Do we have any
and you got to
duplicates?
figure out which thing you don't need anymore sometimes.
Yeah. And it's cooperation. Like Matt digs up the Force gems, and then other people take the Force gems.
Josh steals all the Force gems. Yes.
That's cooperation.
There was some salty moments, weren't there, Matt?
Hey, look, I don't appreciate people taking credit for my hard work, as in stealing the Force gems that I dug up.
Yeah,
I didn't take
pushed
credit.
real
I just
hard.
took it.
Yeah, that's true. He just walked up and took, and one of them he took from behind me. He somehow reached over me and got it, and I was like, "What in the hell? How did you do that?"
I was still very proud of my moment where seeing Cody goes directly for a 100 count Force gem. I whipped out a bow and arrow and shot him off a ledge real quick.
And then he died, and then we stole all of his Force gems off of his dead body.
Yep.
Yeah, that was real fun.
It was I usually don't play the rogue in video games, but in that moment, my good guy meter went down a little bit.
To be fair, I'd been voted most villainous for about 3 consecutive levels,
and you were routinely throwing people off of ledges.
I had some great timing where it was like you have to throw a bomb down on some cracks and that sort of thing, and so you're watching the bomb, and then I grab
Matt, picked me up and
picked Matt up and threw him into the pit with the bomb, and they both exploded. So it's, I think in that sense, the best comparison in video games might be something like the new Super Mario Brothers games, where you play 4-player and it's cooperative, but it's also you can throw people off ledges, and one person can steal all of the mushrooms that come out of the block, and it's that sort of back and forth multiplayer co-op / competitive game.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. I mean, how do we feel about this version of Hyrule? I mean, it's kind of difficult to talk about, right? Because it's not, I guess, a character in the same way that the world normally is, right? You don't have free roam access to it. But I mean, it is, I don't know. Do we feel like all of its charm is just going back to the fact that it does feel so similar to A Link to the Past?
I feel like that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Later in the game, I feel like there's some more cool, little more unique things that are less tied to A Link to the Past. But this section we've played is very clearly just the area around the castle and then go over to the Eastern Palace. And that's what we've seen. And it's a very direct callback to A Link to the Past.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about, so from a story standpoint, obviously we've already mentioned Vati. But the thing that I thought was very interesting is that aside from the moment that we accidentally release Vati from the Four Sword at the beginning of the game, the main bad guy that we're dealing with for most of this is actually
Cody.
Cody, yeah,
Cody, yes. Cody is the main villain.
The menace himself, Cody. Yeah, no, it's returning big boss of Zelda 2. It's Shadow Link.
Yeah, Shadow Link is really a pain in the booty this whole time so far.
It was so interesting because I guess the way that I was actually reading this, Vati is being talked about as the main bad guy. But the thing is, we only released Vati because we needed the Four Sword to fight Shadow Link, right?
Yes, because Shadow Link kidnaps all the maidens and then runs away with them. And the only way to fight Shadow Link is to release the bigger bad by getting the Four Sword. It all makes very good story sense. It was just the most
convenient weapon in the room.
Yeah.
Like the fact that Link just doesn't have
no other
sword.
options. Yeah.
Insane. We
couldn't go find any other sword in the entirety of Hyrule. We had to yank the one that was going to release the even more dangerous bad guy. But is Shadow Link the main bad guy of this game? Like, it was kind of Don't answer. You know,
might have to just wait and find out. You might be surprised at the amount of plot in this random multiplayer Zelda game that you've never played before.
Oh, that's exciting.
Hey, look at that. Maybe we'll have some longer plot recaps than this one.
I did think it was hilarious that this Shadow Link apparently doesn't steal any ugly maidens, just the beautiful ones.
That was Vati. Vati stole all the beautiful maidens.
Right.
Shadow Link
My
is
bad.
just following in his footsteps.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, yeah, no ugly maidens for sure.
And beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah. No, hey, you're correct about that.
And Vati does
Vati
look
only
like a
has
beholder.
one eye.
Yeah. But yeah, Vati, he is a beholder from Dungeons and Dragons, so he is beholding all the maidens.
he really is. He really is. Anyway, Shadow Link. I always appreciate Shadow Link appearing in a Zelda game as a narrative character, right? Like in a lot of the newer ones, he pops up as like a multiplayer focused, like in A Link Between Worlds, you can go do street pass battles and whatnot. And in Link's Awakening remaster, he just functions as kind of like the chasing you through your hand built dungeon situation. So I like Shadow Link appearing as like a character as part of the story. That's always a lot of fun for me. Just going to open it up to the table. Does anyone have any like observations they want to make about Four Swords Adventures generally, or fun points they want to make about the game?
So I've played this several times, usually single player, which works really well with a GameCube controller. I might have to bring it in one of these days so you can just see how it works when it's single player.
Yeah.
And then also just had the opportunity to play like 2 players occasionally. I've never played it 4 players before, and it is surprising how different it is between 1 and 4 people, or even 4 and 2 people. Just aside from just the overall silliness, just how some parts of the game didn't seem to unlock at all if you didn't have 4 people, and how you have to manage the items very differently with 4 people. And so that was a big observation I took having played this since it came out.
Do you have a preference?
To be determined.
Okay. Fair enough.
So, Josh, how does it work in single player? Like, we've got a bunch of puzzles where there's, everyone has to stand on a separate block. So how does that work in the single player mode?
So you play with a GameCube controller, and since there's extra buttons, they can add extra functionality to those buttons. One thing you can do is just separate the links and control one at a time, and then you can just cycle through them. And you do have to do that sometimes if the switches are distant from each other. You may have to just walk over to the switches 4 separate times. In the cases where you need like 4 people to push a block or pull a lever or stand on those square switches, the game has pre-built formations. So, Cody may know this reference better than Matt or Lyndon, but in a lot of old JRPGs, you just have party members that just follow you around. The links do that if you want them to. They'll just follow you around, but then you can lock them into vertical. That was horizontal with my hands. And vertical and horizontal lines, or into a...
Nobody would have ever known it's an audio medium.
Or into a 2x2 square, or you can lock them into the diamond formation we had to stand in sometimes.
Yeah.
And you can just use the C stick to switch between those.
Gotcha.
When you go into an interior area, since you don't have multiple people, it just pops that Game Boy Advance screen up in the center like it did when there was only one person left. And then, so you don't ever need the second screen at all. If in the cases where you need to view both screens, you can hit the Z button and it'll just minimize that Game Boy Advance screen for you to see where the giant bomb is on the big screen.
Yeah. Or where so if you need to be standing on a switch in one room and then doing something that switch unlocks in another room. Okay, cool.
There are a few portions where it's a little bit complicated. We had a puzzle where you had to shoot through multiple rooms to hit with a bow.
Yeah.
You can't see both parts of that at the same time.
So you just kind of have to guess a little bit.
Kind of have to guess a little. So there's a little bit of weirdness, but I think it mostly works. It works better than any of the other attempts at single player, multiplayer Zelda games.
Okay.
Well, fair enough.
Interesting. I think it sounds like they would be very different experiences, to the point where I would be interested at some point in the future going back and playing this in just its single player version, and kind of experiencing the game both ways, because past being a little bit more, I guess, involved in the puzzle solving, just you by yourself. I would imagine that there's also a big change to just the cadence of the game as you're doing things like combat and stuff, right? Like when you're playing with 4 people, it's a ton of fun, obviously, but it is very frantic. Like,
yes, it's a little more organized. And I'm pretty sure when you're playing single player, you only carry 1 item at a time.
Yeah.
But that means that all 4 of your links have a bow and arrow, and you can line up in a row and just shoot 4 arrows at a time.
Awesome.
And so some of that combat feels maybe easier, but it's also a little bit more fun than frantically running around because you're the guy stuck with the lantern and you have no extra offensive capability.
Yeah.
And you're just hoping the guy with a bow will get your back.
Yeah, so if they're in a diamond formation or whatever, for example, when you swing the sword, do they just all swing the sword?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So you can just sort of form a big death ball and Whereas our combat method is that some people do things strategically. I get the super spin attack and start whirling around the screen.
You're an agent of chaos around the screen, and we're all trying to avoid you as much as everybody else. Yeah, exactly.
Because you can hit each other. Like, there was one section with the slingshot where it was like, all right, well,
y'all were all just slingshotting it, because the 3 of you each had slingshots, and I hung out with the bomb because we needed them for puzzles, and you guys just kept slingshotting each other because one person would get stunned, and then everyone would kind of hop over him, and then they would get stunned. So you guys were just in a constant cycle of stunning, and I'm just sitting back here watching you guys act like idiots, and then blew you up with bombs because
I wasn't being an idiot.
Accident.
I was doing it on purpose.
Also fair, yeah.
You just didn't notice, and so you didn't vote me down at the end.
That's true. I think I voted you as most helpful every time, and you're probably like the shadow pick for.
You thought he was hapless, but in reality he was nefarious. There you go. Yeah, but I would be very curious to see the way that the flow of the game is when you're playing just by yourself. And I will say that, like, I use the word frantic, and I know that can sound negative, but I didn't. I had a really fun time with it, honestly. Like, it is just, the chaos is fun. Actually, for similar reasons that Mario Party minigames and stuff can be fun, right?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. If only at the end of each level, Toad shows up and says, I've got 3 bonus stars.
And then some random wins.
That are just for random things, like who got hit the most.
Their sword the most times.
Yeah, exactly.
Who rolled.
Lyndon always wins Mario Party because of those bonus stars. It makes me infuriated.
And here we have 2 bonus stars for chopping the most bushes. Okay, cool. Thank you, Toad. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess just I'm trying to assemble some general thoughts here, I guess.
Streamline, Lyndon. Streamline. Come on. Pull it together.
I am truly doing my best here. You go. You haven't talked a lot.
Hey, look, you are the self-assigned host, so it is your responsibility.
I'm delegating.
So all of this is really just we've done 2 big worlds and 3 basically dungeon sections all together. I think we probably should move on into talking about those. I think we've
talking specifically about
the worlds
levels and areas,
general, because I think we've covered general thoughts.
Okay,
so
let's
move on into dungeon conversations.
Yep, I can do that. All right, let's go ahead and get into part 3, which is the dungeon map, where we analyze this week's 2 dungeons, not even really dungeons, but this week's stages, worlds, from mechanics to music and more. The 2 areas of the game that we played this week are, and I actually don't, what
Whereabouts of the Wind and Eastern Hyrule.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. So let's go ahead and start with Whereabouts of the Wind, which I actually think was like a very flowery, very elegant sounding name that didn't end up like
having anything to do with wind.
Yeah. I was getting much more of like Wind Palace, like something like that vibes. And really all this was just like it was the equivalent version of when you're just wandering around whatever parts of Hyrule Field you can get to at the very beginning of any top-down Zelda game.
Yep.
Right. This was the introductory area. It was the first 3 worlds of Super Mario World. Right. Like it's just figure out your bearings area. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just Whereabouts of the Wind sounded much more exciting than it actually was.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, it's more like a tutorial.
Yeah, so Vardy is a wind sorcerer, so the wind is sort of thematic, but there was no particular essence to it.
Yeah. And so as we said before, the structure of each of these worlds, stages, whatever, is that they're split into 3. What's the actual nomenclature here? Is the stage the whole thing together, and then it's split into 3?
I think what the game calls the worlds or whatever is levels. I think it calls it level 1, Whereabouts of the Wind, and then it has 3 stages.
Got it.
I think that's what it's calling it, but it's all a little irrelevant. It's a Mario world. And it has stages.
Yeah. So the 3 stages of Whereabouts of the Wind are Lake Hylia, the Cave of No Return, and Hyrule Castle. So already 2 very big locations right there. Yeah, I mean, gonna open it up for some quick thoughts. So I will say that I was a little embarrassed looking back on it, how long it took us to get through Lake Hylia, right? Just given that Matt and I were doing this for the first time and kind of trying to figure out the flow and the way that things work. Even stuff as simple as like learning instinctively to look down, like when to look down at the Game Boy Advance and when to look back up at the TV. That took some time to sink in, honestly. Like,
Yeah, the flow of this game is so different from anything else, and like picking your own character out on the screen. And luckily you were green and I was red, so they were very easily identifiable. But like there's a blue and a purple who, if I was blue or purple, I would totally get confused all the time about which one was which. And I'm not even colorblind. So like there's some difficulty there, but like just constantly getting confused about, wait, which one am I? Oh, I'm over here. What am I supposed to be doing? Which item do I have? Yeah, so there was a lot of like really trying to get involved and immersed in the control and visual screens that took us longer than it should have, and we probably took twice as long on Lake Hylia as we should have, theoretically speaking.
Yeah. I mean, so mechanically speaking, there's nothing too terribly complicated that happens in here. What we spend most of our time doing in Lake Hylia and in the Cave of No Return is getting used to the I guess the signposting that this game can do, right? Which is like learning how to recognize a block that you have to push with 4 people, or learning how to recognize a block that you only need 2 people to pick up, and then getting comfortable with the flow of like being up on the TV screen or going into a cave or house or whatever area, and the way that you kind of move back and forth between those 2 things. Yeah, it's a good little tutorial area, I think, is Lake Hylia. That's about all I have to say about it, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Josh, Cody, how do you guys feel about it? I know you've played it probably many times. I don't know. How many times have you beaten this game, Cody?
I don't know if I've personally beaten it. I've sort of more like watched the whole thing on YouTube, because being able to get together 4 people and 4 Game Boy Advances and link cables and all this kind of thing is such a hassle that most people haven't had that experience. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm familiar with it, but I'm sort of, this is probably the most I've actually played it personally.
Yeah. Nice.
So that was part of why I wanted to get the opportunity to do it while we were here.
For sure.
And I think it's interesting. There's very few buttons, I guess. Well, there's B button, which is sword, A button, which is whatever item you've picked up. There's L and R are L is basically the
where am I?
The where am I? I've lost track of where I am button that makes you blow up into a magnifying glass on the screen. Mm-hmm. And the R button, as they say in America.
The invasive R.
The R.
The R button is basically you can roll, you can pick people up, you can pick up items. It's sort of
it's very versatile.
It's sort of what you would consider an A button to be in other games is assigned to the R button.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Can I just say too, we haven't recorded our first Minish Cap episode yet, but one of the things that I was planning to bring up in that episode is how much I appreciate having a roll function in a top-down Zelda game. Like, I feel like that doesn't happen a lot. It wasn't brought back in A Link Between Worlds, which I thought was interesting.
Phantom Hourglass has it, but it's a hassle.
Yeah, I was going to say,
it sucks.
I figured out how to do it one time in Phantom Hourglass and then never tried to do it again.
Yeah.
Without spoiling too much, they fixed it in Spirit Tracks.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, that's
So you will be able to roll more easily in Spirit Tracks. But yeah, I think the only sprite-based Zelda games that have rolling are Four Swords Adventures and the Minish Cap.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I always do appreciate seeing it. So I think overall my main thoughts on the Whereabouts of the Winds were just it was a nice introduction back to a familiar feeling version of Hyrule, right? I appreciated how much it felt like versions of the world that I've seen before. And I appreciated how things that are menial in other Zelda games just kind of took a little bit more effort and time to do here, just by virtue of having 4 different people that you're all working to control at the same time. How do we feel about combat in this game? Because I have 1 or 2 thoughts, honestly.
Yeah, look, I think the hitboxes could be better, or, well, not to say that they made a mistake when doing it, just that I get a bit frustrated when I like to get to hit a bit diagonally, which is something that, which has annoyed me in a few older Zelda games. I want to be able to just swing and it just, broadly hits everything around. I think we had some fun. There was a boss in the final boss before we wrapped up was, I think everyone died a couple of times. There's sort of some difficulty in the combat.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that will continue going forward, but
it's definitely not as precise as I have come to expect. Yeah. I mean, even A Link to the Past, I think, has got a little bit more intentional precision, right, than this does. But especially some of the newer ones, your Link Between Worlds, Link's Awakening Remaster, right? Even Minish Cap. Like, I feel like Minish Cap feels a bit more precise in its movements and in your ability to engage with enemies than this game sort of did. Some of that is just the visual confusion, right? Like a lot of it is just taking that extra few milliseconds sometimes when there's, if there's 20 enemies on the screen and also 4 players, and the players are all moving and each is a different color, and the enemies are all on the screen at the same time. They're all moving and they can be similarly colored to some of the players, right?
Yeah. And the enemies are throwing bombs and the allies are also throwing bombs.
Hey, most of the time those bombs are accidental, okay? Most of the time.
No, I think you're right, Lyndon, that I feel like on the occasion where you get a moment and you're like, it's just me fighting this enemy, everybody else is off doing something else, and there's just one guy, it feels not all that different than A Link to the Past.
Yeah.
The Minish Cap probably refines it in a different way, and it definitely doesn't have the wide swings of like A Link Between Worlds or the Link's Awakening Remaster.
Yeah.
It is the older feeling kind of 4-direction sword combat. But because so often you have 30 soldiers on the screen and they don't even like move in a line or something, like they move all frantically and shake around the screen. So it's all pretty frantic. And I think it's by design intended to just be a mess.
And they can overlap one another, right? I mean, like talking about even your like original Link's Awakening sort of situation, you have enemies that are like moving, one little grid space at a time essentially, but they're not overlapping, right? Like if 2 moblins came face to face in OG Link's Awakening, one would turn one way and one would turn the other way, right? So, it is a very different feel for sure. The thing is
that works to your advantage if you have a fire rod and you can wipe out an entire platoon of soldiers by just standing there going.
That was the next point of just like a lot of the combat is also designed around smart use of your items. The bow and arrow charged up will shoot through multiple enemies at once. So if you have a big group of soldiers and you've got a bow, then you can take out 10 soldiers in one shot.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Kimmy. How's it going, buddy?
He's been over here getting attention, and I stopped giving him attention for like 30 seconds, and he relocated to find more.
Yeah, this is Jackson's cat, Kimi, the namesake of Formula One world champion, Finnish Formula One world champion Kimi Räikkönen.
Is that a ragdoll cat?
He's a Berman.
Berman. Yeah.
They're similar looking because ragdolls are the hypoallergenic versions of Berman cats. He is what's called a lynx point Berman, so his facial markings are more make him look a little more wildcatty.
Yeah,
but
he is not
sweet.
hypoallergenic.
No, very much not. But he's also the sweetest cat I think I've ever known in my entire life.
Yes, he's so sweet. He has not won any Formula One world champions.
No, he's very
Not yet.
unathletic. He's very lackadaisical. Yeah.
Yeah.
All he wants is pets.
Maybe we can provide an image in the description or something.
I think that's possible. Hey, Matt, you should at least get a picture in the Discord.
Oh,
real
I already
quick,
put
but-
one on Discord.
Oh, good.
There's
cool.
already
in the,
one
in
on
the
there.
pet channel.
Yes,
Nice.
it's already in the pet channel.
Good,
Yes.
good stuff. Yeah. No, going back to the combat though, the thing is, the way that I'm describing this makes it sound like something that would be a knock against the game in another Zelda game, right? Like if we were talking about this in the context of like Phantom Hourglass or Twilight Princess or whatever, right? It would be one of those things where it's like, well, the combat is imprecise, and so moment to moment, it's just not as fun as But the thing is, it's like this game knows that that's the case. It's a part of the design philosophy. Like it has combat, and the combat can be fun, but that's not the focus of the gameplay, right? The focus is the cooperation between the four players, right? And so, at least in the way that we're playing Four Swords Adventures, so sure, it's not as fun just purely from a combat perspective as some other Zelda games are, but also nobody's kidding themselves about that being the thing that you're supposed to be focusing on the most, right? So it's fine.
For sure.
Yeah, and there's some great combat stuff, or at least weapon stuff that I wish they would have more of, like the flamethrower setting fire to every piece of grass and just like lighting up half the screen on fire, or just killing about 30 guards in one shot because they all just got lit on fire, There's some of that chaos.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And then there was, our combat was okay. The Great Fairy's combat,
That was incredible.
the Great Fairy can launch artillery strikes.
That was some Dragon Ball Z stuff going on there. That was awesome.
Well, the Great Fairy just got a 12 kill streak, right? And so the AC 130 came in.
Oh, there, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So okay, we've got real life artillery strike, we've got Call of Duty kill streak, and we've got Dragon Ball Z anime. Josh, do you have another metaphor or simile for us?
Metaphor.
A Bombos medallion.
There you
Hey,
go. Bombos
there it
medallion.
is.
That's a Zelda one.
Keeping it a little closer to on task there, but yeah, for sure. So Great Fairy was actually one of the, fun character to see sort of pop back in here.
It was also ridiculously surprising.
Right.
We all had this moment where Cody, Linda, and I were all looking at each other going, because you have to, the way you make the Great Fairy is you save
and this
one.
is in Hyrule Castle, by the way.
Yes, this is in Hyrule Castle, which is the end of World 1. You have to save Azora from prison from one side of the castle and escort him or her to the other side of the castle to reconnect with his partner, who he calls his other half. And once you connect to them, you have to bring them back out into the open. And as soon as we connected them, we were like, oh, this is definitely the boss.
Well, it's because they were saying things like, once you unlock the barrier, I will be free. And it's like, all right, well, this is real, like Phantom Hourglass, like Ghost Sisters and like on the ghost ship.
And who's
energy.
who's the one in Link to the Past? The Blind, yeah, Blind the sorcerer. It felt like that exactly. And so we were all three just like, yeah, definitely going to be the boss. And we come out and it turns into the Great Fairy, and we're like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then Great Fairy decimates the entire soldier population of Vati's army, and we're like, oh,
I will say
okay.
it is weird seeing in this A Link to the Past feeling world the Wind Waker Great Fairy, Kaipora Gaebora from Ocarina of Time, enemies from A Link to the Past. It's just this weird like gumbo
And Tingle.
and Tingle, right? Yeah,
We hate Tingle.
I love Tingle.
yeah.
Josh likes Tingle. Everyone else in the world hates Tingle. You hate him. Stop it.
I love to hate him. Yeah, he's a necessary part of the formula. Is
He
where
is
I'm at
not
with Tingle.
necessary in any way, shape, or form, Lyndon.
I disagree. So anyway, it's this weird stew of Zelda things and references, which I really do appreciate. I know we're in the dungeon map. We're getting kind of all over the place. It's tough because there's no
The whole game is a dungeon.
Right. The whole game is a dungeon, but there's also no focus points really within dungeon and stage experiences the way that we would have with like Key Cavern. It's about the keys, like let's talk about that mechanic and whatnot.
It becomes a little more prevalent as we go, but I mean, the first world in particular being so tutorial heavy, it feels very much just like teach you how to use the items.
Yeah.
You could argue the first stage is about like learning about the fire rod and how you can cause mayhem with it.
Sure.
Learning how the boomerang works, meeting Tingle. And then the second stage, they put you in a cave and you've got to have lanterns and the floors can open underneath you. And then in the third stage, it's a little more like there's a lot of puzzles about just pushing blocks, going in and out a lot.
Yeah.
Shooting the arrow through the door from the Game Boy to the TV.
Right. Right. And of course, in level 2, like you're saying, we do have more recurring mechanics to talk about. Right. But just in this first world, like you're saying, definitely very tutorial based, but still a lot of fun to be had in here. I appreciated the setting for all of these places, It really did sort of feel like what would it be like if it took you 45 minutes to get through one of those first dinky caves that you find in Link's Awakening or A Link to the Past, right? And then going back to Hyrule Castle, always fun, right? And this one feeling like a more complex take on A Link to the Past. Hyrule Castle was a good time as well. But yeah, I think as an introductory dungeon, quote unquote, world, whatever. These 3 stages functioned very well to just educate me as, this is the language of the game. And I appreciate that. I think, especially given that it's such a different kind of Zelda game, I needed that. Otherwise, this could have been a much more frustrating experience than it actually was.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Let's talk about the boss of Whereabouts of the Winds, which honestly was one of the high points of the entire day for me. Phantom Ganon.
Oh, yeah. I was like, okay, dude, just for context of everyone listening, we got here around noon and we spent about an hour eating lunch, setting up, talking, and then spent the next putting a 2-year-old down for a nap. Yeah, the next 2.5-ish hours playing this game, and immediately sat down, and we've been recording for the last, half hour-ish, 45 minutes. So it's been kind of a whirlwind day, so excuse us if we're a little harebrained, but yes, Phantom Ganon, fantastic boss fight, so much fun. It was really cool that they reused the art style of the Wind Waker Phantom Ganon. Obviously, it's not a direct translation because we're on a top-down game versus Wind Waker being a 3D game, but the visual style was immediately recognizable as, this is Phantom Ganon from Wind Waker. Yeah. Got it immediately.
It's just another one of those weird occurrences that's mixed up with all the characters from everything else.
Right. Yeah. And you were talking, recently for us, but months ago for the people listening, about the tennis that has to be in every Zelda game.
Dead Man's Volley.
Right? Yeah.
Dead Man's Volley. And so this brings a really interesting twist on that, which is all of the links are hitting it to each other until the final link, hits it up.
Yeah.
How does this work in single player?
Unfortunately, probably fortunately for the person playing it, but it's pretty much just gone. It's just it becomes normal Dead Man's Volley where Phantom Ganon just hits it back to Green Link over and over.
I thought the addition of the cooperative mechanic here made this is something we've done so many times.
It's a really cool addition, and that's one of those big differences. And I knew it was going to be different going into it.
Yeah.
Even though I have probably only done it once before. But to spoil potential future season, Triforce Heroes does not have...
I don't know if that's a potential future season or not.
It does,
probably not.
It does not have that same protection in it. When you play single player, the game basically pretends like you're not playing single player. There's very few quality of life fixes on single player versus multiplayer. And so what you actually have to do in that case is you have to manually position 3 links around a room and swap between them on the fly. After you've hit, you got to swap to the next link, make sure you hit it. And so it's a huge hassle to do that. So I'm glad in single player, they just said this would be terrible. and you don't have to. But it is really fun in 4-player, and I think we did a really good job with it. We got a strategy really quickly.
That's a high fives around the room. Go us moment. Yeah. Let's go.
We picked it up very quickly. I mean, honestly, it is nice because it does kind of handle a lot of what would be like in a more combat, like precision focused game. There would have been some elements of this that would have required more fiddling with, right? Like you don't have to aim towards the next person that you're bouncing the ball to, you know. The game sort of does it for you. That doesn't really make it any less fun. And I feel like in our specific situation, we would have, you know, like it would have taken a minute to be like, okay, Josh over there, Cody over there, Matt over there, face this way, get your timing right. You know, it's like bouncing the ball between 4 people in that way would have been a bit of a lift. But I don't know. This was honestly a very, very fun boss fight. And I'm just thinking back on first dungeon bosses in the whole Zelda series, and I don't know, this is up there a little bit. I mean, this is more fun than Moldorm, you know, it's more fun than Goma. It's like
I mean, it's more fun because we're enjoying the companionship and the laughing at each other and the you got to do this, and like the discovering of the mechanic as a group. Like I think the main draw of this game, which I think is what Nintendo was going for, is that when you play it with friends, it's just more fun. And like that's true in general. And like when you can get 4 people in a room who are just having fun, it elevates the game from something that probably wouldn't have been all that fun if we were playing it by ourselves to a whole nother level. So I really think that while I agree with you that this is, as far as fun factor goes, a really fun first dungeon, quote unquote, boss fight, it definitely doesn't like scratch the surface of good dungeon bosses in general. But because we're doing it together,
I don't know, there's some really derpy and dumb top-down Zelda
for sure. But like
I think it is. I mean, but it is designed well for that, because that's the thing. You can have cooperative mechanics that just make you really frustrated at each other because it's someone's job to do the thing and it's hard to do and they keep messing it up. But they sort of balanced it right in a way that, you know, everyone was still having fun and that sort of thing. And that's something that, that's not guaranteed. There's plenty of cooperative games out there where you just get frustrated at each other and at the game.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go ahead and move on to our discussion about the second world level, whatever, that we visit, which is the eastern portion of Hyrule. The goal of this entire section of the game is that we're trying to make it to the Eastern Palace to free the Second Maiden. Very exciting premise, right? Because especially with the similarities to A Link to the Past, you start hearing about the Eastern Palace and you start thinking, okay, cool, we're going to go see someplace that we've seen before. Which ended up being true. Like basically the third stage of this entire world is a redux of the Eastern Palace, just with Four Swords Adventures mechanics and styling, which I thought was a lot of fun. But you know, this whole world, I think, did a lot to really showcase the mechanical, like the extent to which you can leverage Zelda mechanics to do puzzle solving with this format. Right. A lot of juggling of things like moon pearls and such in this area. And the second stage specifically, which required like investigation and kind of deductive reasoning and moving, like almost no combat whatsoever. Right. Like we said earlier, a lot of kind of trying to put the pieces together of how do I move through this stage. Josh and Cody, whichever one of you feels like going first, how did y'all feel about Eastern Hyrule?
So I thought that I was interested with the Dark World mechanic, because you've sort of got the system where you can jump in a portal to the Dark World, but half of the other players could still be on the main screen, and you're on your handheld viewing the Dark World portion of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's an interesting, there's lots of stuff. I mean, they haven't done that much with it yet, but there's a lot of sort of, possibilities for, I guess, because that's an extension of what we saw in the first world, which was the it's the contrast between the on on your DS, not DS, it was a Game Boy Advance, but we were playing on the SP, so it reminds me of a DS.
It's very DS.
Understandably, yeah.
Except for Josh, who was playing on the original Game Boy Advance, which was tragic because it doesn't have a backlight.
Yeah, that was a bad decision.
It was a bit more rough than I expected even.
Might need to find an SP for the next time we
be
get
considering that, actually. I'll have to see if I can locate one.
But, I think it's a really interesting, I really liked the fact that any hole you fall down isn't just treated as, you took damage and you'll, reappear.
Mm-hmm.
They're actual holes, and you have to, climb your way back out of them by going into your Game Boy Advance screen and that sort of thing. So I think that those mechanics were quite interesting to introduce.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something we haven't really touched on that shows up in both worlds, but more in the second, is that you have to carry items around. You have to carry a key. You have to carry a moon pearl. You have to carry a letter.
And it was similar to carrying the key in Phantom Hourglass. Right.
Yes. Like the big key in Phantom Hourglass. Mm-hmm. Except here you have 3 friends who can defend you or try to steal the item from you, which there is some practicality to, because the person that unlocks the door gets extra
100 force gems
because you did the key carrying. So someone could let you carry the key the whole way and then whack you and take the key to open the door at the end. But it's interesting. And in some games, like in Phantom Hourglass, that's a little tedious. Here, they notably don't slow down your movement by 75% or whatever.
Yeah. And you can actually do certain things while you're still carrying items, right?
You could still jump with the Rock's Feather.
Yeah.
But you can jump with people with the Rock's Feather. You can carry someone over a chasm if you have the Rock's Feather.
And that's part of where Village of the Blue Maiden, I've said, is a bit infamous, but that's why is there's things like that you just don't think about.
Yeah.
And you could miss those side doors to some of those houses, or not realize the lantern can burn a stump the same way the fire rod can. Mm-hmm. And if you just don't notice the weird little things, you'll be stuck there for hours. But no, that stage in particular is really interesting because it just has the deductive reasoning. It is that investigation stage rather than any kind of normal dungeon, right?
Well, it was so funny because it honestly felt like the Uke Village in Phantom Hourglass, right? It was better, but but it's a similar sort of thing, and it's a gear that Zelda games fall into sometimes that I never really associated this sort of experience with Zelda until recently, because a lot of the games that we've been playing recently have done variations on this, and I like it. It is a puzzle, right? In a very strict sense, in that you have to kind of be remembering certain details as characters are relaying them to you, right? And it's not something that the Zelda games that I grew up mostly with did a lot of, right? Like Link's Awakening didn't do a ton of this. Ocarina of Time didn't do a ton of this, right? So yeah, I actually thought it was a fun change of pace, and didn't mind it at all. I was actually kind of terrified of this stage because
I was too, because I've been stuck in it so many times. Yeah. But maybe it's partially just that having 4 people, you figure it out. Because you have to collect so many clues. Right. You've got 4 people can go 4 different directions to find the clues. You just have 4 eyes on the screen to find the secrets versus trying to figure it all out by yourself.
Yeah.
It was not nearly as complicated as even the last time I played through it myself, which was not that long ago.
Right,
I probably played it last year.
Everyone's just running around on the screen doing different things.
Right. I do think there's a portion in that stage where you have to use the Pegasus boots to slam into some people, and someone has to get through the crowd.
Yeah.
That is a bit complicated to do by yourself.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I bet.
Because do you just have to kind of keep slamming into the line of people and then just
I don't even remember how you do it.
There is an old lady who's slower at getting back than everyone else, and you sort of make your way through the gap.
Gotcha.
Got it.
Cool. And then, of course, there's the massive lady that you just have to get 2 people to push out of the way, right? That was hilarious.
Yeah. Well, that one was funny just because of the sound effect that came with it.
It was a moving of a rock sound effect. Wait, is this a real person or is this a statue?
It's a huge woman, right? Yeah. Hilarious. Some good humor there for sure.
Kind of going off of that, we haven't talked very much about, or at all, about music, and the music in the Village of the Blue Maiden. Frankly, it might be the most iconic piece of music from this game.
What the creepy version of Kakariko Village?
Yeah. Like I can recognize it instantly.
Yeah. I was going to save a discussion about music until kind of closer to the end of the dungeon map. But yeah, sure. Why not now? I think one of the things that is both a boon and a hindrance to this game so far is the fact that the music is pretty much entirely leveraged from older titles, honestly, like primarily A Link to the Past. It's not necessarily always a bad thing. Like when I go to Hyrule Castle and the A Link to the Past Hyrule Castle theme plays, it's like, well, who can get mad about that? But still, it's like, I'm sure that the time and budget wasn't there to compose an entire new soundtrack.
Right. It's a spin-off game that's a mashup of a bunch, as you were saying before, a bunch of previous Zelda games. Like this bit's from A Link to the Past, this bit's from The Wind Waker. And yeah, it's mostly remixes and that sort of thing, but I don't know that there's much that's going to be like brand new music.
Well, and if you're going to steal from older games, then, going to A Link to the Past primarily is not a bad place to start. So it all works, it's really great. I mean, it still has a better soundtrack than Phantom Hourglass.
Amen to that, brother.
Poor Phantom Hourglass. We need to start a Phantom Hourglass jar.
No, we would have to. If we did that, we would be able to fund Cody's air travel to and from Australia.
Yeah, well, that would be. I think that would be good. It sounds like a great idea to me, so I don't know what you're complaining about.
You really stumbled onto something here, Matt. We're going to get Cody back once per season just on the Phantom Hourglass jar.
God, that sounds really bad. I think your wife and my fiance would both really have some things to say about that.
Right. It's like we could have paid off our mortgage.
Or we could have actually gone to Australia on vacation.
Oh, that's even better. Yeah. How about that, Cody? We'll all go to Australia. We'll come to you. Yeah.
With the Phantom Hourglass jar.
We'll go dive the Great Barrier Reef. It'll be fun. So yes, music overall, nothing too new to talk about here, but I did really appreciate this reorchestration of Kakariko Village, right? Like the kind of like minor key, very like creepy note that it hits is fun because it's a tune that you have so much familiarity with, but in this format, like in this more downbeat version of it, it's kind of like it puts you on your back foot a little bit, right? And it
makes it unique.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it tells you this is like something creepy and weird is going on here without you having to even talk to anybody.
And there's something that's going to give you like in 6 months or whatever, if someone asks you, what do you remember from Four Swords Adventures? You're going to be like, oh, there's a creepy village.
Where everyone got like disappeared into the dark world for some reason, and then we had to go find them. Like, that one will, and it's also one of the few times where you're really like investigator Link, right? Like this was this whole stage or substage or whatever you want to call it was just purely like a cop mystery, and like Lyndon said, like Uke Village but 10 times better, and like that's very unique.
Notably with much less genocide.
Although apparently it wasn't actually genocide because all the Uke apparently got better. So like the guy in Monty Python.
Do your own research, Matt. Do your own research.
Seriously. Yeah. So anyway, like it's just it's a unique piece of Zelda gameplay that's not really repeated elsewhere or done very often, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I think this game this is the Village of the Blue Maiden is the first really memorable stage. Mm-hmm. I'm just off the top of my head saying I think there's 3 to 5 stages like that just stick with you. And
that's really exciting.
That
honestly.
I can just come up with off the top of my head. I was like, I really like that stage. I remember it because of this. But Village of the Blue Maiden, for better or worse, for some people it's just terrible, but you remember it. It is a very memorable Zelda moment.
It is, and I think I love that it's in here, right? Because I think, like we were talking about earlier, the temptation could be just to write this off as like kind of a dinky side project, and in some ways it is. But like I said, there are some big Zelda feeling moments in here, and this was definitely one. And the fact that this is not an outlier necessarily really excites me, honestly. Like I'm very happy to hear that. Let's talk about. So we talked about Village of Blue Maiden. The coast, the first stage, not really a whole lot to get into here. It feels like an extension of the introductory area in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like it is more dungeon I'm sorry, that's the wrong word. More combat gauntlet than some of the other stages we've done so far.
Yeah.
There's some interactive learning with Shadow Link throwing the large bombs and having to run through the little maze and hide from the bombs. But then the other highlight there, and maybe it's not the only time it shows up in the game, is the return of Manhandla as the boss of that stage.
That was what that was. Okay.
Yeah, and Manhandla at this point in history had shown up very, very few times, and even now has only shown up a handful of times.
Yeah.
In this case, I think Manhandla appears in a very different incarnation in one of the Oracle games.
What? I was going to say, I can't think of an appearance outside of The Legend of Zelda.
No, Manhandla shows up in one of the Oracle games. Is kind of a reimagining.
Okay.
But this is more similar to the original Legend of Zelda's version.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly associate Manhandla with Hyrule
I was going to
Warriors.
say they did a fully 3D version of Manhandla, and
Which
Hyrule
sounds
Warriors.
terrifying, but I have not played the original Hyrule Warriors, so I wouldn't know.
I haven't played either of the Hyrule Warriors games.
You didn't play any of Age of Calamity?
Mm-mm. I played the demo.
I mean, I don't think you'd like it very much, but like...
It's just not my style of game.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But Manhandla's pretty cool. Just pull up a picture of it in Hyrule Warriors.
Okay.
But no, that was Manhandla from The Legend of Zelda, just revised to make it so that each player had to destroy one of the heads specifically, and if you mess it up, you had to start over.
Oh, wow. That's terrifying. Gross. Ew. Horrible.
Right.
It is a giant plant monster.
Yeah.
That's what it's supposed
God.
to be.
It's like the monster from Little House of Horrors, but it has 4 heads instead of
That
one.
would be Little Shop of Horrors.
Whatever.
Broadway classic.
Yeah, the one that you were in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only the best thespians have been in Little Shop of
Thespians.
Horrors. Thespians. Did I say that? Thespians?
You said thespians. It's thespians.
Oh,
the
my
P,
bad.
not a B.
Okay, thank you for clarifying my pronunciation there. Yes. Anyway, it's really fun play. I like it a lot. Anyway, yes, this Hyrule Warriors version it's that just with 4 heads, so that's fun. That was a fun. I think we would categorize that as a mini boss fight for sure, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it was a good one. I enjoyed it quite a lot.
And a lot of the stages have, like, they do bring in Shadow Link as a mini boss for the end of the stages pretty frequently.
Yeah, I
but
think we fought him like 3 out of 6 of the worlds,
Right.
at least 3 out of 6 that we were in. We fought Shadow Link at least once.
He brings different abilities with him. Sometimes he'll have
splits
bombs.
into 2.
Yeah. Sometimes maybe splits into 4.
Sometimes maybe.
Ooh.
Sometimes he goes into the dark world.
Fun tease there.
Like sometimes he brings a different item or something to mess with you.
Yeah.
And so it's just we've seen the beginning of it, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on from the village of the Blue Maiden, right? Village of the Blue Maiden. Let's talk about this game's take on the Eastern Palace, which this is another example of a location that I enjoyed being in simply because it feels so similar to A Link Between Worlds and A Link to the Past version of that dungeon. Weirdly, like, in all the games that it appears, it's always in this place and it always feels like this. It's not like the Eastern Palace is a thing that really crops up in, Twilight Princess or, like it always is exactly pretty much like we're seeing it here. Obviously, give or take some complexity, and the layout of the dungeon changes based on what you're doing. But I enjoyed it just because it did feel so familiar. It's fun because there are straight reduxes of some of the rooms that we get in like A Link to the Past, right? Like the balls moving in like a grid room.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the balls moving down the long hallway, and you've got to like alternate, but then there's a big one, Yeah,
and there was an interesting puzzle where people had to be carried through a avalanche of the balls,
right,
through the dark world.
Yeah. Which was a very fun one. I want to say, too, while we're talking about the Dark World again, I appreciate the easy and simple way that this game has of letting players know where everybody is at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's in the Dark World and everyone else is up on the TV, right? There's this cool shadow mechanic where it's like you can kind of see where you're...
Where you are in relation to the other players.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And just to elaborate on the puzzle so everyone can understand, like the puzzle with all the marbles, the issue is that someone in the dark world can still interact with people in the light world, and someone in the dark world can pick up and carry someone in the light world and help you avoid obstacles that are not there in their version.
Yeah.
That was me carrying all of you to safety, by the way. I just want to take credit for that.
Only because
vocally.
the game forced you to.
Yes, only because. But
Not out
credit.
not out of the goodness of your heart. You weren't feeling exceptionally benevolent or anything.
Definitely true, but I still want credit.
Here you go. You have it. I will say this puzzle. It's not like it took us a long time to figure it out. But the thing about top-down Zelda games is that when there are height-based mechanics in them, usually it takes you a minute to figure that out the first time, right? Because some do have them and some don't have them. And so this was definitely the first example of like, oh, yeah, so when you get picked up, you're now above the moving balls, right? I'm not sure if that recurs throughout the rest of the game.
I don't think it's like a heavy emphasis, but there is some of that. And some of it, like they just play with visual effects. Like when we had Rock's Feather, if you saw on the TV especially, Link would actually get closer to the screen when he jumped up. And so they use it a little bit, but it's not a super, super common thing.
Okay.
This Dark World carrying mechanic definitely comes back.
Yeah. Obviously, all three stages of both levels have been contained within the dungeon map as we've been discussing it. But stage 3 of Eastern Hyrule, the Eastern Palace, really did feel like a dungeon all unto itself, which I'm very impressed by, right? Because I think this section took us the longest to get through than anything else. I think it took us even longer to do Eastern Palace than it did the Village of the Blue Maiden, which is really fun. Like, I guess I was thinking that each of these stages was going to be a bit more perfunctory than that, but knowing that it's on the table to just have a dungeon in here.
And it was single-handedly responsible for about 80% of the deaths.
Literally, yes. That's not an exaggeration.
Yeah. We all definitely started to turn on each other towards the end of this dungeon, right? Oh, she looks gorgeous.
Doesn't she?
Matt's fiance picked out her wedding dress today, so
it was a good day.
Yeah. So that's what's going on at my house while we're all out here. I don't think we've actually mentioned the setting for this whole thing, but tonight we are recording in the room that Matt and I recorded the entirety of the first 2 seasons of Sacred Realms from. This is the media room.
This room has a lot of history.
Yeah, it really does. Around season 3, we started moving to my place, and that's about the same time we started recording on patios and things. But this is where it all started. So anyway, a lot of fun just basically having an entire dungeon lumped into this third stage of Eastern Hyrule. Honestly, I thought this was a great time. Like, I would say I spent probably more time in here without feeling stuck on anything than I do in most 2D like top-down Zelda dungeons these days.
Yeah, I think it's still a relatively simple dungeon. Mm-hmm. It just is a lot of fun. Like, yeah, and part of that, I think for both of us, part of that is that it's based on A Link to the Past. It feels very similar to the Eastern Palace and A Link to the Past, and so you kind of just keep going. Yeah, because a little bit just riding on the nostalgia of it. Mm-hmm. But there's some actual smart puzzles in there, like the carrying puzzle. There was another one of those puzzles where you shoot the bow from the TV to the Game Boy, and had to be cooperative, where someone had to hold on a switch on one screen so that you could hit the switch from the other screen.
Yeah.
And I feel like the combat in it was also just good. Mm-hmm.
Good mixture.
It was a nice mixture. Yeah.
Of course, the puzzle we were talking about earlier, where somebody has to shoot a bow into a room that other people are in, and kind of let you know where to stand so that you're hitting switches. That was a really fun time. I think one of the reasons that this was so fun was that there was a little bit of a juggling of items that was happening as you go through it, right? Between lanterns and bow and arrow and bombs, and the Rock's Feather and Pegasus boots weren't in here, were they? I don't think so.
No, different.
Yeah. But regardless, it felt like it had a progression in the way that dungeons always are fun to me when they feel this way, right? Like, you see a room early in the dungeon, and then later you get an item and you come back and you can do more stuff in the room. In any other Zelda game, you keep that item, right? It's a little different here because once you leave this dungeon, you don't have it anymore. But when you're in here doing it, it feels the same way. Which, and honestly, in some ways it feels even more intense, right? Because it's like a dungeon where you're getting 3 or 4 key items, right? And so when you're evaluating it just on the feel of what does it feel like and how fun is it to do a dungeon in a top-down Zelda game, this is kind of a traditional experience just on steroids, right? Because you get tons of items. Yeah, all of them, you know, which was a lot of fun. I think this was the moment that really to me was just like, yeah, I can feel like I'm playing a Zelda game with Four Swords Adventures. I appreciated that. The boss of the main final boss of Eastern Hyrule is Stone Argus. And this was one of the more frantic experiences that we had the entire time that we were playing.
This one was pretty rough, honestly. Like it was hectic and high damage output, and the mechanics that we talked about earlier with Manhandla, where it was color coordinated, translated into Stone Argus, which was an interesting translation. Like it was very odd to see you only be able to grab certain of his little orbiting meteor things.
So it was a sort of is it in Ocarina of Time is the one where you grab the hook shot and you get the hook shot and you keep pulling the little
that was Majora's Mask. Yeah, in the Great Bay Temple. Yeah.
Great Bay, yeah. So it's sort of like the central enemy is being orbited by these different orbs that you're sort of pulling with the boomerang, which is operating as the hook shot, basically. But they're color coordinated, so everyone has to contribute their part to it.
Yeah. Which I did appreciate, right? It's a much more frantic version of all people having to collaborate than Phantom Ganon was, because like we said, Phantom Ganon, a little bit of it's on autopilot, right? Game's handling some stuff for you. This was very much more like everyone looking at the floating stones being like, okay, I got a little bit more or less of my color than other people, so I've got to get in here and make some stuff happen. But still a very fun experience. We burned a lot of lives in this boss fight.
Yeah, he seems to hit pretty hard. I think this fight is a good show of how the boomerang works. One of the things I had to mention to everyone early on is that you can hold the boomerang. Like it doesn't have to come back to you immediately, which is not how a boomerang works. But these boomerangs are magical, and you can just throw them, and they will stay in place as long as you hold the button. Which helped me in the fight because trying to aim and time when you throw your boomerang for when the purple ball was orbited to just the right spot just wasn't going to happen.
Well, and the other thing was there was a disproportionate amount of color coordinated meteors. Like there was more red and purple than there were green.
I was green and I only had one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There was like 1 or 2 green ones. I had like 6 red ones. Cody, you had like 3 or 4. Josh, you had 4 or 5. But
I wonder if that is randomized per attempt.
It's probably got to be randomized. But I was definitely I was just throwing that boomerang as often as I possibly could and trying to get as many of those meteors out of there, because there was at least 20. It was a lot.
Anytime Argus or Wart, I guess he's called in Majora's Mask, shows up, they always put a ton of little balls all over it.
Yeah. And that's a fun note too, is we haven't talked about the mechanics of most of these items a lot, but from what I can tell, all of them do have like a secondary function where they become a little bit stronger by holding down a button. I don't know if the lantern is that way.
And there was, they do have level 2 version. There was one stage at which we went to a fairy who upgraded our.
So it was on the coast in this stage.
Yeah.
And your slingshot situation where we kept stunning each other because suddenly we were throwing
the slingshot and the bombs were
nuts
upgraded
at once.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Big bombs. Okay, cool. Which is kind of a fun, not callback because this game precedes A Link Between Worlds, but it's fun for similar reasons, right? Like upgrading your items and just getting slightly more powerful versions of them. Definitely going to be like looking out for those opportunities as we go further into the game, because having a slingshot is fun, I guess, but having a slingshot that shoots 3 projectiles that all look like they're on fire, that's more fun.
As we proceed through the game, we'll have a little bit more intentional required uses of those.
Okay.
Where here it was very much still sort of the tutorial of here's what a great fairy does. Now your slingshot shoots 3 things instead of 1. Oh, hey, there's 3 Zoras there. Maybe you could hit them all at once.
Yeah.
And it was just a tutorial because you didn't need the slingshot for anything else. And later you'll get to upgrade items and it will actually play into your puzzle solving in a more intentional way.
And to be fair, that same level where you upgraded the slingshots is where I upgraded the bombs, which is why I killed all of you at least once with my bigger bombs that I was accidentally setting and detonating. And look, so it all plays into itself of upgrading items is great unless you accidentally use them against your friends, or in some people's cases, Cody and Josh, purposefully use them against your allies.
Would I do something like that?
Yes, you would.
The answer to that question is yes.
I already admitted to doing something like that.
Josh signed his confession. Cody, it's accepted fact.
Mm-hmm. All right, y'all. Let's go ahead and move on to part 4, which is Bloopy Trails, where we talk about fascinating characters or enemies that we have.
That is not what Bloopy Trails is.
Bloopy Trails.
Oh, sorry. My bad. Let's move on to part 4, which is... Sorry. I've done this enough
Better
times.
leave that in there.
I did it a few weeks ago and I left that in. I'm going to take this one out.
Fine.
Let's move on to part 4, which is Bloopy Trails, where we talk about interesting things that diverted our attention this week. We only have one.
We do have one.
But it was a fun one.
It was a fun one because Josh didn't know it existed.
Yeah, apparently you only get this fun thing if you play with 4 people.
And we discovered it all at the same time together. It's our guy Tingle. Tingle has a tower, and within Tingle's tower, you can undergo an even slightly more Mario Party feeling experience than you do for the rest of the game. Tingle's got a collection of mini games, and we only unlocked 2 while we were in here. I'm guessing we're going to unlock 1 per world,
right?
Or per level for the rest of the game.
You know.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, Tingle's tower, and we did take some time out of our play schedule to go do each mini game once. So there were 2 different mini games. The first one was the Bucking Bronco, in which you get your what I think is a series first, which is a top-down Zelda giving you a horse to ride on.
Yes. That horse power-up is in the game. I was expecting us to see it in a future sit-down. I did not know the mini game was here that lets you use it whenever you want. So the horses are a little bit complicated to ride. When your first experience with them is let's race, go as fast as you can, figure out the controls.
Still better than Twilight Princess.
The controls were way better than Twilight Princess.
This might actually be the best feeling horse riding in all of Zelda.
It's very responsive. I'll give it that. It really responds to whatever direction you tell it to go. So I'll take it.
I was just alluding to all of us running into walls constantly.
Still the best. I mean, yes, we ran into tons of walls. These horses would require
go very
veterinary
fast.
assistance.
Yes.
Ilya
would be very mad at us for hurting the horses.
Very mad. But it was a really fun mini game. I mean, you run through a course. The horses have a jump mechanic. So basically, what we figured out was that you collect power gems in these mini games the way that you do in the dungeons themselves, the worlds themselves. The only thing that they're really good for is at the end of the mini game, depending on how many you get, Tingle will give you extra lives, which you can carry into the rest of the game. So that's, I guess, the chase here, aside from just having fun. Right. Yeah. So there was the Bucking Bronco minigame, which was chaos in the best way, just a ton of fun. The second minigame we did was a thing that we've all done 100 times in Zelda games, which was
Cuckoo wrangling.
Yeah, get all the Cuckoos back in a pen. And that was significantly less fun.
I mean, I like those mini games. Like the Minish Cap has one that you play repeatedly for pieces of heart and whatever. So it's I'm pretty used to playing it. I don't mind it. Yeah, it was not as frantic or fun as the unexpected horse race.
Sure.
But
yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd play it again.
Yeah, as a mini game out of 8 mini games, it seems like a fun little 2 minutes.
Yeah. What I really took away from Tingle's Tower was that, you know how a lot of people only go into Mario Party just to play the mini games, right? I wasn't expecting Zelda to be a platform that would be successful in a similar way. I don't think it's as fun as Mario Party. But there's a kernel of something here. It was a fun time.
No, this kind of stuff works. Nintendo does it with Kirby a lot. Mm-hmm. Kirby games have lots of mini games where you can play co-op and just beat each other up or race to the finish or whatever they come up with. And it actually works pretty well, both in side-scrolling and kind of top-down experiences if you have a smartly thought-out plan. And then we didn't play it tonight. There is another mode that is just fight each other mini game.
Was that the shadow battle?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's something we might have to try out as another mini game later.
Yeah, just for the sake of it. I mean, I know you said that there's like a similar-ish mode in Phantom Hourglass, right? Is there? I know that
there is some kind of mode. I've forgotten how it plays, but yes, there is a multiplayer battle mode of some kind.
Okay. And I never really felt driven to do that. But I mean, Four Swords Adventures, we're kind of here just to go on a ride for whatever this game has to offer. So yeah, I would like to try that before
Well, the Phantom Hourglass one feels like it would just be a hassle to even set up and get started. And
Right.
before you even start it, I feel like you'd be ready to quit.
Yep.
Here, you just hit a menu, and in the next 3 minutes, you're already done with a match. You're like, okay,
Exactly.
you can decide whether you liked it enough to spend another 3 minutes on it or not.
Yep, I think we'll give it a run for sure. But yeah, that was our big bloopy trail for the week was Tingle's Tower, which it is a tower that Tingle operates.
Tingle.
Everyone loves Tingle. You should seriously. I wish we had audio recording of the moment that we discovered that Tingle was in this game. Like literally, where we feel like we're moving towards some big fun secret, and Matt picks up a statue, and under that statue is Tingle, and the groan that happened. Yeah, cool.
It's pretty close.
There's no getting away from him, Matt.
Apparently not.
That was my favorite moment because I knew what was coming.
You know what? The fact that Tingle is in Majora's Mask also infuriates me.
Well, that's where Tingle
That's his
originates
origin
from.
story.
Yeah.
Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah, that's where he came from.
I hate it.
I shouldn't call it his origin story. He has his own game that is his origin story.
Tingle's Rosy
it's
Rupee
his,
Land.
It's his first appearance is Majora's Mask.
Yeah.
Gross.
Yeah. All right, let's get into part 5, which is Z targeting, where we lock on to fascinating characters or enemies that we happen to cross. I'm going to just go counterclockwise around the table, starting with Cody.
All right. Well, speaking of things that Matt cannot get away from, Greg the Block has
He
made
lives.
a glorious reappearance. So-
Greg the Block did make a glorious reappearance.
He grew since his
He
last
was
appearance.
much bigger this
It
time.
took 2 people to push.
Yeah, normally he's a one-person job. Now he's a two-person job.
This might be Greg the Block's final form. I'm
it's
not
his
sure.
ultimate form. Greg the Block went and did an ultimate evolution, an X or Y, which is whichever one.
We've got to get with Kolku and see if he can like come up with like an.
Do you still have the?
Yeah.
good.
I still have them. I'm never getting rid of. I just need to frame them.
Yeah.
Yes.
For people who may have not known that reference from like 4 seasons ago, Greg,
or longer.
or longer, Greg the Block is when there's a block in the center of the room that's blocking off, like it's a 4-way passageway, and you push it and it blocks off the path directly opposite you, but you can go, left or right, and then it resets whenever so you keep having to push it to, to get around to new areas.
It's Matt's favorite kind of puzzle.
Greg and Igor
Yep.
are both the 2 blocks. And
Yep.
now we have a third. We have to name this one.
It's the Block trilogy.
It's the Brock. It is the Block trilogy.
Yep.
Okay, Ivan. Like we've kind of gone with kind of Russian-esque names. So Greg, Igor, and Ivan.
Greg is not a Russian name. Oh, Grigory.
Gregory.
Okay,
Yeah.
You going
Gregory.
like Ivan the Terrible? Is that
Yes,
what you're going
that's
for?
what I'm going for. Yeah, okay, Ivan. This is Ivan. All right, we're going with
it's
Ivan.
Vlad the Blocker.
Ooh, Vlad is even better. Yes, Vlad. That way we don't have 2 I names.
Yes,
Yes,
Greg, Igor, and
Greg,
Vlad.
Igor, and Vlad. There you go. It's Vlad.
Cool. I like
Done.
it. Excellent. Man, you were ready for that. You
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like swooped right in on that.
I almost brought it up when we were discussing the dungeon. Then I was like, I think Cody's gonna bring it up.
Yeah,
so
I
I'm
think
just
that
gonna
was
stay
that was a
quiet.
wise thing to do. You and Cody are on
Excellent.
a wavelength about that.
Talk about
Great.
picking your moment. Very well done.
Well done, Cody.
Josh, I don't know that you can top that, but how
No, I
about you?
can't. My
No
pick's
one
gonna
can.
go to the mages in the village of the Blue Maiden, who we don't really learn what they're actually doing, but everybody in town thinks they're really suspicious because there's just these mages just sitting around
Gazing
mumbling,
into their,
mumbling,
glass walls.
yeah, mumbling to themselves, cryptic things, but then also stealing people's houses and sending them
Turning
to the
them
dark
miniature.
world and juggling with them. And then deciding to give the house back after, you find their lost book or something to help a couple reunite after an argument.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just think it's actually somewhat nefarious, right? Like someone's paying a mortgage on that house. You can't just steal it. Like it's In this economy, right?
That would be
very rude. Good one. That was a good pick. Matt, how about yourself?
I'm gonna go with the Great Fairy, who is split into 2 Zoras. Apparently, if you combine 2 Zoras, you get a Great Fairy, and then that Great Fairy can apparently obliterate any enemy in her path. So I want to go back into Twilight Princess and combine Prince Rowless with any random Zora and see if he can just go start destroying all of my enemies.
That math feels pretty universal.
So yeah, that's the Great Fairy is my pick for her absolute unreal powers of destruction.
Yeah, the Great Fairy loves the smell of napalm in the morning.
I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah. Robert Duvall does, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
Have you seen Apocalypse Now ever?
A long time ago. It's been I remember very little of that movie.
All right. Anyway, yeah. Okay. Good pick. Great Fairy was the one that I was gonna do, but I did have.
I thought you were picking the big lady, which is why I picked. Great Fairy.
I know. Okay. Yes, I did mention that, and so I understand your confusion.
Okay.
In my own mind, I was
being
gonna
considerate.
So, Great Fairy was my number 1 pick, assuming nobody else did it.
Okay. I was being considerate of you because of what you
No,
stated.
No, I appreciate you very much. I really do, honestly. My pick is going to be the enormous woman that requires 2 people to push out of the way from in front of the house. Because, look, I appreciate this lady. She stands her ground. She is not she's not here to be moved by the whims of others, just by the pushes of others. She is quite giant.
That was bad.
Yeah.
You should be ashamed of that one.
I really should. Huge though. It's the first time that I can really recall a human NPC in a Zelda game being moved around in this way, right? And I got a big chuckle out of it.
Well, it sort of harkens back to the Ocarina of Time Fish Zora King.
Weep. Yep. Yep. No. Well, so I guess there was a fun accompanying sound effect, but it took about, I don't know, a quarter of the time. So immediately not as fun, but but definitely a funny moment for sure. And I was actually tempted to mention Princess Zelda maybe, but I don't know how much she comes back later in the story. So I don't know. We'll see. No high hopes because we've been disappointed on that front before.
We're almost always disappointed by Zelda's appearance in the game.
Yeah, that's like an exception that proves the rule sort of situation.
Yes, absolutely
really.
It is.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into part 6, which is our final thoughts, in which we let Matt wrap up this section of the game in as succinct a way as he can think to do.
So we start our adventure with Four Swords Adventure. See what I did there? With a lot of...
Good for you.
Thank you. With very little background information and a lot of fun. We had a great time playing through these 2 worlds, enjoying the dungeon-esque qualities that are somehow made to feel like overworld exploration through general hijinks and combat that were mostly due to Cody and Josh's various villainous behaviors, but all the way through with 2 dungeons and 2 bosses that were a lot of fun, enjoying our time with the game so far, and looking forward to playing more over the next couple of weeks. So a lot of fun to be had.
Yeah, I just want to kind of come off the end of that and say that I was very pleasantly surprised by everything that, we played for about 3 hours. 2.5-ish hours, right? I had a great time. Like, seriously, I enjoyed it so much. I would never have pegged Cody as being the
villain.
A villain in the way that
Mr.
he was.
Deputy Mayor
I
himself.
definitely knew coming into this exactly what I was getting into playing with Cody.
Mr. Deputy Mayor himself is the primary antagonist of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's not Vati, it's not Shadow Link,
it's Cody.
It's not Ganondorf at the last minute. It's Cody. Yeah. So. Oh, I got him.
Got him while he was drinking.
There we go. I'm proud of that one. But no. I'm going to give you a second.
Ow.
You okay?
Yes.
Okay. Man, I love those. Anyway, so yeah, truly a really fantastic time, and I am very excited to keep playing more of this game. Like, I would say I'm actually more excited to go play more of Four Swords Adventures than I have been to continue on with several other games that we played, which is fun. I was not expecting that. So,
well, absolutely, I totally agree with that, and I think, like I said, kind of closer to the beginning, was so much of that is just to the fun that is had by having 4 people in a room who are not only enjoying the game but enjoying each other's company and joshing around with Josh and throwing Cody off of ledges, and these are things that other Zelda games can't exactly replicate because they're not multiplayer.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is Codying a verb? Like,
it should be.
Yeah. We need to do some research on that. Yeah.
But yeah, like this game lends itself to I'm just here to have a fun time and dick around, for lack of a better terminology.
Yep.
Like it's just fun.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. All right, y'all. Of course, we're going to continue on with our Four Swords adventure in the coming weeks. It's going to be a great time. Josh and Cody, thank you so much for joining us. Cody, seriously, we've met Josh in person one time before, and we were so happy that we could do all of this in person as well. But getting to meet you in person is truly a special moment. The amount of coincidences and like small world things that led to this even being a possibility is actually pretty astounding. So,
no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So are you ready for Australia facts?
Every episode with Cody on it has to have the Sacred Realms rundown extended.
Yep. Cody, wow us with your Australia facts.
Right. So Australia is a monarchy run by the King of Australia, Charles III. And
wait, is it really?
Yes.
I did not know that
Matt,
at all.
That's just the king. The king of
England. The King of England.
It's a Commonwealth.
Yes,
Yeah.
got it.
But the King of England is also separately the King of Australia, the King of Canada, the King of Jamaica. Like anywhere that's in the Commonwealth, British Commonwealth, has the same king. But it is actually, but the king in Australia is represented by the Governor General, who is sort of the symbolically stamps documents and things representing the king.
Yeah, he has a big ring that he dips in wax sometimes.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And yeah.
So when is the king going to invite you to dinner?
Well, that's what I'd like to know.
Yeah.
So,
hey, Cody, can you give us your thoughts on the British monarchy?
well, how many hours do we have? No, it's look, I'm not a fan of the British monarchy. I don't think it should be the Australian monarchy, but that's the one we have. So anyway, next up is let's have a look. Part 11, America facts.
Good. Well, last time we learned the national currency of America, so I'm can't wait to hear what you got for us now.
Yeah, so I was excited to learn this week that America also has a monarchy. So I went to a restaurant here called the Burger King. And this Burger King takes his royalty seriously. I went into the bathrooms and there was a sign there saying hand washing nights. And so I was actually knighted for my services in hand washing by the Burger King. Which making me an American knight.
Do you get to add some like initials to the end of your name now?
Well, I think I'm Sir Cody Davies now, thanks to the Burger King who knighted me for hand washing.
So are you Sir Cody Davies, OHW, Order of Hand Washing?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay,
so
good.
Yeah, so that's America facts. Next up, we've got part 12. Wow, the Water Dragon in Skyward Sword doesn't know what she's doing.
Still accurate. Accurate.
It's always good to check in on this one.
It's become a permanent fixture of the extended Sacred Realms rundown.
We did have a water stage today that had those Zoras that were kind of annoying for a minute.
And she's not keeping Zoras out of her waters, so therefore she's still bad at her job.
Doesn't know what she's doing.
And then let's see. Part 13, I'm happy to guest on everyone's Zelda podcast, just like Joshua. And so if anyone wants to invite me or Joshua to a Zelda podcast, I'm sure that's always going to be an exciting time.
At Watcher Joshua and at Magic Cody.
That's
there you
right.
Go. Hit them up. Can confirm they're a great time.
Yeah, it's if you want me to come in person, you're going to need a Phantom Hourglass jar.
Which I recommend just anyone start, really.
Yeah.
Like,
So, yeah, part 14, visit zeldawiki.wiki and install IndieWiki Buddy, the browser extension that crosses out fandom results and replaces it with an independent wiki. Fandom is our nemesis.
Mm-hmm.
They added an AI assistant.
Oh, no.
That gives you the wrong information. Like, it's like a chat
It was pretty
GPT.
terrible. The first examples I saw, it was like sometimes an AI assistant, you can ask like the Bing chat to help you search a website and you might get some reasonable results. That was just like what did it spit out random Zelda words and sentences that didn't make any sense?
Random word, and it was like, oh yeah, this is Ganondorf's girlfriend or whatever. And it's like, what are you talking about? What? Yeah, and so so that was a disaster. And that's the sort of thing that they get up to over at Fandom. So don't visit them.
Are we at war?
We are at war.
Okay. All
right.
And then
the king know?
Well,
which king?
Which king? The king of Australia? The Burger King or the King of Australia? Because I don't know. I am a knight in the service of the Burger King.
Yeah. Well, we have to let him know
I do
at
probably
least.
have.
I mean,
I do probably have obligations now as a knight of the Burger King for like managing the peasants or whatever you do as a knight.
You should read the manual.
Yeah, I'll have to check in on that. And then part 17, visit zeldauniverse.net and zeldamaps.com.
Zeldamaps.com. So if you're like me and you didn't actually 100% Tears of the Kingdom and you feel a little bad about it, you should go check that out.
How long till we add a Four Swords Adventures map?
Well, it's behind about 15 other Zelda games in the queue.
But the one that people are actually most likely to use it for right now, Tears of the Kingdom. Go get your Korok seeds.
Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are both on there, and these are both games that require a map. If you're going to 100% it, and you want to not have to manually keep track of every Korok in the game, you're going to want to be able to cross them off and that sort of thing on a interactive map if you're trying to 100% it. Otherwise, you're just going to be wandering around for that final Korok for like 50 hours, desperately trying to find it.
Or 100 hours.
Or 100,
Or 500 hours.
I was going to say, the ceiling is very, very high.
I had a map, and I still had trouble figuring out where the last one was when I did it.
Yeah, well, when there's 1,000, right? It takes some double checking for sure. Cody, thank you so much. Your additions to the Sacred Realms Rundown are always appreciated. And I guess we're going to be doing that for like 4 or 5 episodes in a row, right? So that's the Cody Davies podcast rock block right there.
So you're gonna have to come up with unique Australia and USA facts for every single one. So I hope you're working on them already.
Oh yeah, I'm full of America facts now that I've been visiting Texas.
He's here to.
I mean, they are just Texas facts at this point, if we're honest.
He's here to immerse himself in our culture, which isn't even really a culture.
I mean, it's a thing.
No, there's a very unique culture here. I went to the store and there was an intruder deer that you could buy that's self-healing because you can shoot the intruder deer that you put in your backyard.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was really impressed by that. I was like, wow, this is America.
Yeah.
They have self-healing deer that can heal from bullet wounds.
Good. That's great. The pinnacle of technology. Yeah. We might have to vet the America facts before we just let Cody do them on the podcast, right? Because whoo, man, it's rough out here right now.
Some of them are pretty bad.
Okay. We appreciate both of y'all very much, and this is going to be a very fun season. Matt, you ready to get out of here?
Let's do it. I need to go take my fiance to dinner.
I'm taking my wife to a white tablecloth steakhouse for dinner tonight.
See, we're not doing anything that fancy because one of her friends is in town, so it's kind of like a triangle date.
Do you not like her friend enough to take them to a white tablecloth steakhouse?
I don't make enough money to take 3 people to a white tablecloth steakhouse.
Gotcha. Cool. Actually, neither do I, so that's fair.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So, yeah,
I love you, Matt.
I love you too.
All right, y'all. Let's go ahead and get into some outro. We'll be catching up with all of y'all about more Four Swords adventures before long. Going to be a ride. Can't wait to do it. If you enjoyed today's show and you would like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/sacredrealmspod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show. That makes us very happy Hylians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sacred Realms Pod for updates on the podcast and for behind-the-scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next Wednesday with our thoughts on Four Swords Adventures Chapter 2. We'd love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. Four Swords Adventures can be played, I think, only in the way that we're currently playing it, right?
You can play it with one player, which is probably the way that most people who want to follow along are going to be doing it, because that just requires a GameCube or a GameCube emulator and a normal controller.
Okay, gotcha. But it literally is just the GameCube copy or
it
emulation.
Is the only Zelda game, we'll say, released before 2010 that has never been ported to anything.
Okay. All right. So none of y'all are probably playing this, but if you do have a copy of Four Swords Adventures and want to play along with us, would love for you to share your thoughts on our social channels. In the meantime, may your hearts be full. May your arrows never miss. We'll catch y'all next time. Sacred Realms is an independent, listener-supported podcast, which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Business operations are handled by Matt Willoughby. Our music is generously provided by Darknuck and is available to listen to on Spotify. Finally, we'd like to thank Nintendo for continuing to create such exceptional and innovative experiences.